Chapter 1. Late at night, it was as dark as ink. A shining meteor streaked across the sky. It was very conspicuous in the dark sky. In the center of the star continent, there was a huge palace floating in the void. An old man with white eyebrows wearing a black robe and holding a green scepter bowed to the throne in front of him. Minister Si Kongyen greets the king. On the throne sat a middle-aged man wearing a green dragon robe. He had a towering figure. Even though he was sitting, he gave off the feeling of a mountain. The towering middle-aged man slightly nodded. He looked down at the old man with white eyebrows and black robe and said, "State Preceptor Si Kong, why are you here so late at night?" Si Kongyen's body trembled slightly. He knelt on the ground and said, "My king, I was prompted by a premonition. I looked at the sky and discovered that a demon star will descend tonight. It will disrupt the foundation of our dynasty for 10,000 years. I didn't dare to be negligent and came to report to my king." Whoosh, whoosh. Heaven and earth shook. The eyes of the middle-aged man on the throne burst out with a bright light. "Who dares to disrupt the foundation of our dynasty? Kill without mercy." The middle-aged man stood up. His voice was sonorous, revealing a domineering might. His figure was indeed very tall, like a giant. It made people tremble at the sight of him. Si Kongyen, who was kneeling on the ground, said, "I have worked hard to calculate that the demon star will fall in the east. My surname will be Yi." The middle-aged man was silent for a while. He walked a few steps in front of the throne. His eyes were filled with killing intent. "Pass down the order. In the entire star continent, all people with the surname Yi who were born yesterday, today, and tomorrow will be killed without mercy." "Yes, my king. I will do it immediately." Si Kongyen bowed to the middle-aged man. He stood up, bowed, and took 3 steps back. He then turned and left. Greenleaf Village was an insignificant small town in the endless territory of the East Divine Continent. The Ye family was the only ruler of Greenleaf Village, the #1 family. Tonight was an extremely important night for the Ye family. The matriarch of the Ye family, Lu Yi, had been pregnant for 10 months. Tonight, the fetus moved and was about to give birth. 15 years ago, on the same day, Lu Yi gave birth to her first child. Unfortunately, her first child was unable to sense the stars and was a cripple. For more than 10 years, Lu Yi had not given birth to another child until this year. If the second child was still a cripple, then the patriarch's bloodline would reach the end of the current patriarch, Yi Feihong. The patriarch's position would definitely be transferred to another bloodline. As a result, Lu Yi's second child naturally attracted a lot of attention. All the branches of the Ye family were paying attention, especially those who had hopes of inheriting the position of the head of the family. Compared to the liveliness of the Ye family's main courtyard, the side hall of the Ye family's residence was very cold and cheerless. As the side hall of the patriarch's residence, it was also very spacious. The night lanterns dispelled the darkness. A 15 or 16-year-old youth was lying on a large embroidered bed. In the large room, there was only a maid of the same age as him standing guard. Suddenly, the youth on the bed opened his eyes. The scene in front of him was very unfamiliar to Yi Xing. Swoosh! Yi Xing immediately straightened his upper body and sat up. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. What was going on? Yi Xing's thoughts were spinning like lightning as he tried to recall. That's right. I entered the fantasy world through the supercomputer connector and started the internal test. In the fantasy world, I was a hunter with a longbow. I fought a boss alone and traveled all over the world. Then? I remember now. It was a warning. Something happened to the supercomputer connector. All players, please exit the game immediately. I repeat, exit the game immediately. Otherwise you will have to bear the consequences. What a scam. I was fighting a boss alone and I was down to my last bar of HP. Why would I exit the game at this time? This hesitation only lasted for 3 to 5 seconds. Then, there was no then, how did I appear here? Did I exit the game or not? Could it be that I am still in the virtual world? For a moment, Yi Xing's mind was full of question marks. Yi Xing immediately took his hands out of the blanket. Looking at his young hands, his mind was blown and he cried out in surprise. The question marks in his mind were instantly answered. An answer that was difficult to accept. "Young master, you are awake?" Yi Xing's actions surprised the maid in the room and she walked over. Yi Xing looked at his hands. They were only in his teens. These were definitely not his hands in the game, nor were they his hands in the current world. The only thing that could be confirmed was that he was already in another world and had become younger. You are? Yi Xing looked at the maid who walked over with a puzzled expression. Young master, I am Shadowpiercer. We grew up together. Don't you remember me, young master? Shadowpiercer looked at Yi Xing anxiously and said, You were competing with young master Yi who in rock climbing and fell down. You hit your head and fainted. Young master, you must have hurt your head. Think carefully. I am Shadowpiercer. Do you remember? I am Shadowpiercer. Shadowpiercer's words seemed to add some new memories to Yi Xing's mind. Waves of headache hit him and he frowned. Then, he hugged his head with both hands. After a while, Yi Xing put down his hands and raised his head. His eyes were clear. He looked at Shadowpiercer and said, I remember now. I saw Xu Angling and Yi Xing together. I was so angry that I quarreled with them. Shadowpiercer nodded repeatedly and said, Yes, yes, young master, it seems that your head is not hurt. Young master, you are impatient. Miss Xu Angling is your fiancée, but she is dating young master Yi Xing. No wonder you were so angry that you lost your mind and fought with them. Young master, you can't sense the power of the stars and have not stepped into the martial arts world. Naturally, you were no match for them. Even if you played to your strengths and avoided your weaknesses and competed with young master Yi who in rock climbing, you still lost in the end. Instead, you fell down and almost lost your life. Yi Xing had fused with the original owner's fragmented memories, so he was able to recall most of his injuries. With little Qing's explanation, he was able to recall everything that had happened. At this moment, there was no anger in his heart. Instead, he was a little excited. Through the original owner's memories, Yi Xing already understood that the star continent was different from Earth. It was a place where one could practice. Yi Xing was an orphan. He did not have any attachments on Earth. Otherwise, he would not have signed up for the dangerous closed beta test in the fantasy world. Coming to the world of the star continent, he thought that he could become an expert in the future. This was more exciting and refreshing than playing virtual games. Of course, he was excited. In the future, I will definitely become an expert and beat Yi Hu, Yi Xing, all of them to the ground. Yi Xing excitedly fantasized about the future and laughed happily. In the star continent, there was no magic, no fighting energy, and no summoning. However, one could sense the stars in the universe and absorb the power of the stars to practice. Sensing the stars and absorbing the power of the stars was the only way for humans on the star continent to step onto the martial path. Of course, not everyone could sense the stars. Out of 10 people on the star continent, about 4 could sense the stars and step onto the martial path to become a martial artist. The other 6 could not sense the stars and could not practice. They could only be mortals for the rest of their lives. No matter how much a mortal trained, even if they trained their body to the extreme, they would only be equivalent to a martial disciple in the 3rd stage of the martial path. They could not be compared to a true martial artist. The star continent was a world where the strong were respected. It was a world of martial artists. Mortals were like ants. If they could not sense the stars, they could not become martial artists. In the eyes of martial artists, they were trash. Young master, you are trash. Trash. You cannot practice. In the future, I am afraid that you will not be able to compare to young master Yi Hu, let alone young master Yi Xing who has already stepped into the 4th stage of the martial path and become a true martial artist. Shadowpiercer saw that Yi Xing was so happy. Perhaps he did not remember that he was trash, so she immediately poured cold water on him. Yi Xing's memories of the original owner became more and more blurry. He really did not know that he was trash. He could not help but ask, I am trash? What is trash? Shadowpiercer did not have much knowledge, but she was still a martial disciple in the 1st stage of the martial path. She knew some common sense questions and said, Young master, only by sensing the power of the stars can you practice and step onto the martial path. Young master, you are unable to sense the power of the stars. Although you train your body very hard, even if you train your body to the extreme, you are only equivalent to a martial disciple in the 3rd stage of the martial path. You are far from being a true martial artist. How do I sense the power of the stars? Shadowpiercer, tell me. I don't believe that others can sense the stars, but I can't. Yi Xing suddenly raised his head. The current him was no longer the him of the past. He did not believe that he would end up like an ant in this world where he could practice. Since the heavens allowed him to come here, then he must not let this opportunity go to waste. On Earth, he was an orphan. He lived a carefree life and did not have much success in his life. But now that he was in this world he could cultivate. He was in high spirits and full of ambition. He had to be the king of kings. Young master, you have already tried many times. Being unable to sense the power of the stars is not an exception. In the star continent, at least 6 out of 10 people are unable to sense the power of the stars. Xiaoqing said. She wanted to make Yi Xing understand the reality of the situation. I will try again. Yi Xing smiled faintly. His tone did not allow for refusal. Fine. Young master, you have to hold on. Don't be discouraged again. Xiaoqing sighed and said helplessly, first, you have to calm your mind and spirit. Then, you need to focus your mind on the sky and let your mind wander. Let your soul sense the stars in the sky. If there is a star that is destined to be with you, it will form a connection with you. Then, you will be able to sense the power of the stars and guide it into your body to practice. Hearing little Qing's words, Yi Xing's eyes focused on little Qing, whose 5 hearts were facing the sky. At this moment, his heart was in turmoil. His eyes were like a scanner, scanning Xiaoqing's entire body into his mind. Xiaoqing's body became transparent, and the route of the power of the stars in her body was clear to him. What is going on? Yi Xing was shocked. His head and eyes seemed to be a little different from ordinary people's. Singles Day, a gift for my brothers. I will upload my new book. Please recommend it. Chapter 2. Yi Xing felt a sense of familiarity when he saw the image in his mind, and he quickly recalled it. When he participated in the closed beta test of the Xuanhuan world, his body was scanned like this, but it was a supercomputer that scanned him. Could it be? Yi Xing was shocked, and an unbelievable thought flashed through his mind. The supercomputer had fused with his brain, and his brain was billions of times more powerful than a normal person's. Yi Xing knew very well how powerful a supercomputer was. If a person's brain was as powerful as a supercomputer, then how smart would that person be? He would definitely have a photographic memory, and he would be able to understand and learn everything the moment he saw it. He would definitely be an extremely monstrous genius. To verify his thoughts, Yi Xing moved his gaze away from Xiaoqing and focused on the wall in front of him. The supercomputer's scanning ability was not limited to the human body. As expected, under Yi Xing's gaze, the wall in front of him quickly became transparent, and only some veins were left. The composition of the mud and stones in the wall was scanned by the supercomputer, and it contained many unknown minerals that could not be found on Earth. It was clear that seeing through one wall was not the limit of the superbrain's scanning ability. Soon, Yi Xing's gaze penetrated through the second and third walls. A semi-transparent model was formed in his mind. The walls were no longer solid, but veins. When Yi Xing's gaze went through the 3 walls, he saw many people in front of him. He knew where he was. It was the hall outside his parents' room. Parents? Yi Xing was shocked. He was an orphan, and he did not have parents, but just now, the word parents flashed through his mind instinctively. It was clearly the original owner's instinct. The original owner had the deepest memory of his parents. Although he was a cripple, which disappointed Yi Feihong and Lu Yi, as the only son, Yi Feihong and Lu Yi still cared about him. However, all of this changed after Lu Yi had her second child. Yi Feihong and Lu Yi put their attention on the second child, and gradually neglected him and became cold to him. Especially as the birth of the second child was getting closer and closer, in the past month or so, Lu Yi had been living in seclusion, and Yi Feihong had completely ignored him. The second child was very important to whether Yi Xing could continue to be the head of the family. At this time, Yi Feihong's crippled body was naturally ignored, or rather, abandoned. Through his memories, Yi Xing could feel that the original owner was a filial son. He had a deep obsession with his parents. Even though he was already dead, his consciousness still had a deep attachment to his parents. Although the original owner had a crippled body and was unable to step onto the path of martial arts, he had always worked hard to train his body, making it extremely strong. Although he was only a 16-year-old youth, his body contained a considerable amount of power. Yi Xing had no idea where to go in this strange world. The Ye family was a martial arts family. If he wanted to cultivate, he would have to stay in the Ye family. Therefore, since he had taken over the original owner's body, he had to use the original owner's identity to stay in the Ye family. Then, the original owner's parents would be his parents. As for the original owner's fiancée, Yixing snorted coldly in his heart. He would divorce her sooner or later. It was late at night, but there were so many people in the hall. It was obvious that his mother was about to give birth to her second child. This younger brother or sister of his was already disliked by his father and mother when they were still in his mother's womb. If the second child was born, he would probably be even more disliked. Yixing sighed in his heart. If the original owner didn't die, his life would definitely be difficult in the future. However, he didn't care. He only needed the original owner's identity. If his father didn't love him, and his mother didn't love him, he didn't care. Suddenly, Xiaoqing's voice sounded in his ear. "Young master, do you understand?" Yixing immediately retracted his gaze, nodded and said, "It's no big deal." Although he only glanced at Xiaoqing, Yixing had already scanned the scene of Xiaoqing's cultivation into his super brain. He even knew the circulation of the stellar force in her body. Yixing immediately followed Xiaoqing's example. He closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and let his mind wander as he sensed the stellar force. In the blink of an eye, Yixing felt a surge of energy descending from a faraway place and enveloping his body. In an instant, a pitch-black sky appeared in his senses. He could vaguely see the outline of a gigantic stellar force. The surge of energy was coming from that gigantic, pitch-black stellar force. It made his body feel extremely comfortable. What shocked Yixing even more was that he felt his body becoming stronger. His strength was increasing. Young master, you really sense the power of the stars?" Xiaoqing touched her lips with her hand. Her eyes were filled with shock as she looked above Yixing. At that moment, Yixing was no longer above the roof. Instead, something strange had happened. It had turned into a pitch-black sky. Yixing could vaguely see the outline of a gigantic stellar force in the pitch-black sky. However, in Xiaoqing's eyes, it was pitch-black. She couldn't see anything. It was very different from the stellar force that she knew. The first time a stellar force sensed a stellar force, an anomaly would appear. Whatever stellar force sensed would appear in the anomaly. It was called an astrology. An astrology was divided according to the stellar force sensed. It was an important part of one's aptitude. Xiaoqing had never heard of a stellar force sensed by a stellar force, but it was pitch black and she couldn't see any stellar force. However, the appearance of the anomaly and the surging stellar force proved that Yixing had indeed sensed the stellar force. At that moment, he was guiding the stellar force into his body to strengthen it. Xiaoqing couldn't believe it. Yixing was obviously a cripple. He had tried countless times in the past, but he couldn't sense the stellar force. However, this time he sensed it all at once. It was almost natural. There was no setback at all. As far as she knew, it took a long time for the stellar force to refine the body for the first time. It could take an hour if it was fast, or a whole day if it was slow. Could it be that young master spent a lot of time sensing the stellar force in the past? Adding up the time before and after, he was able to sense the stellar force naturally this time? Xiaoqing thought to herself. She recalled the time Yixing had used to sense the stellar force. If it wasn't half a year, it was at least a few months. She couldn't help but think to herself, so young master isn't a cripple. It's just that his aptitude is so bad that it's unparalleled? The stellar force entered his body and instinctively strengthened Yixing's body. The effect was remarkable. However, Yixing realized that his body only absorbed a small amount of the stellar force. Most of it was lost. It was just that the stellar force he sensed was too overwhelming. Therefore, only a small part of the stellar force was absorbed by his body. It was enough to make his body stronger quickly. Yixing's mind turned. He followed the way Xiaoqing's stellar force circulated in her body. He controlled the stellar force in his body to circulate. The superbrain quickly scanned Yixing's body and found the 3 meridians Xiaoqing used to circulate the stellar force. It controlled the stellar force in his body and rushed it into those 3 meridians. In an instant, a large amount of stellar force gathered in the 3 meridians. Then, it was sent to every part of his body through the 3 meridians. The speed at which Yixing absorbed the stellar force was more than 10 times faster than before. Yixing's body was strengthening every second. His strength was increasing rapidly. After about 7 minutes, the dark sky above Yi Xing disappeared and the connection to the stellar force was cut off. At this time, Yi Xing's physical strength had more than doubled compared to before he sensed the stellar force. He felt that his entire body was filled with power. Yi Xing compared his physical strength with Xiaoqing's through the superbrain. He realized that his body was slightly better. Xiaoqing was a martial artist in the first stage of the martial path. This meant that Yi Xing had already stepped onto the path of martial arts. His cultivation had also reached the first stage of the martial path. A stellar ring had formed in his dantian. This was only the first night Yi Xing had arrived in the star continent. He had already taken the first step on the path of martial arts. He was very excited. His dream of becoming a king among kings had begun. Yi Xing's heart was filled with pride. His voice was filled with hope as he said, "Star continent, I Yi Xing am coming. I will definitely become a peerless expert and travel the world. My trip to the star continent was not in vain." Xiaoqing naturally couldn't understand the hidden meaning in Yi Xing's words. However, when she heard Yi Xing say that he would become a peerless expert, she couldn't help but laugh. In Xiaoqing's opinion, her young master's aptitude was so bad that it was incomparable. It was a complete joke that he would become a peerless expert. Xiaoqing covered her mouth and laughed. "Young master, you have only just sensed the stellar force. Who knows when you will reach the first stage of the martial path? You are too far away from being a peerless expert. It is simply a world apart." Yi Xing didn't care about Xiaoqing's contempt. He asked, "Tell me, what realm do I have to cultivate to be considered a peerless expert? Why am I so far away?" Xiaoqing said, "There are a total of 9 realms in the martial path. The first 3 realms are just to train the body. They are called martial disciples. It is the entry stage. The middle 3 realms are to produce internal strength. Only then can one be considered a real martial artist." Xiaoqing's voice began to become excited and full of yearning. Only when one reaches the 7th stage, he can release internal strength and injure people from a distance. He is called a martial path master. However, the 7th stage of the martial path is only the ruler of a region. If you look at the whole Luoxing kingdom, it is nothing. Only when one reaches the 8th stage of the martial path can one be considered a great expert. Xiaoqing's tone changed. But in the Luoxing kingdom, the real first-class experts are the great masters of the 9th stage of the martial path. Moreover, even the great masters of the 9th stage of the martial path can't be considered a peerless expert. Yi Xing asked, "What is considered a peerless expert?" Xiaoqing's eyes were full of hope and reverence. She took a deep breath and said, "Only the martial saint who has surpassed the 9th stage of the martial path can be considered a peerless expert. One person can fight against thousands of soldiers and horses." Chapter 3. Haha. Between me and a martial saint, there are only 9 realms of the martial Tao. How could it be so far? It's not that far. Yi Xing laughed. He didn't really understand the differences between the 9 realms of the martial Tao. Moreover, he had the super brain and was very confident. Even if he knew, he wouldn't think that he was far from a martial saint. Not that far. Xiaoqing screamed like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Young master, are you crazy? That's a martial saint." Taking a deep breath, Xiaoqing realized that Yi Xing's head injury was still somewhat affected. Otherwise, he would not know about the 9 realms of the martial Tao. Naturally, he wouldn't know how high a martial saint was. "Young master, our Ye family is the ruler of Greenleaf Village, the #1 martial arts family. The head of our family is only at the 5th realm of the martial Tao. The head of our Ye family is also one of the top forces in Azure Sky City. The head of our family is also only at the 7th realm of the martial Tao." Xiaoqing said in a profound tone, "In the entire Zishan County, there are over 1,000,000 martial artists within a 1,000 li radius. However, there is only one martial saint, and that is Lord Zishan Ho. Young master, out of 1,000,000 martial artists, there is only one martial saint. The difference between a martial saint and an ordinary martial artist is like the difference between heaven and earth. What you just said, you must not say it in front of others. Otherwise you will be laughed at." Yi Xing smiled slightly. His thinking was naturally different from the martial artists of the Star Continent. Even though he already understood from Xiaoqing's words that a martial saint was indeed a heavenly existence compared to an ordinary martial artist, it didn't affect his confidence in the slightest, nor did it create any pressure. Martial saint. A peerless expert. Yi Xing said in his heart. He wanted to be a peerless expert, and a martial saint was his goal. Young master, although you're still miles away from becoming a martial saint, you've finally sensed the power of the stars today. This means that young master will be able to step onto the path of martial arts and not have a crippled body. The patriarch and matriarch will be very happy when they know about this. I'll report this to them now. Seeing that Yi Xing stopped talking, Shaoqing happily left Yi Xing's room. Not long after, Shaoqing came back. Her face was full of joy. She said, "Congratulations, young master. Mistress' second child is born. Young master, you have a younger brother." Yi Xing smiled faintly. If he was still the original owner, this wouldn't be something worth congratulating him on. If his mother's second child was a daughter, perhaps he would be treated better. But if it was a son, his situation would not be as good as before. "Young master, why are you smiling so unhappily?" "Ah, right. You must be afraid that master and madam will love your younger brother more than you. Speaking of which, master and madam haven't cared about you for more than a month." Shaoqing was really a little heartless. It was enough to keep these things in her heart, but she actually said it out loud in front of Yi Xing. Fortunately, Yi Xing was no longer the original Yi Xing. He just smiled at Shaoqing's words. He didn't care whether these cheap parents loved him or not. Shaoqing finally realized that she had said something she shouldn't have. She smiled embarrassedly and said, "Young master, master wants you to go see him tomorrow. You just woke up and haven't recovered yet. Rest tonight. After breakfast tomorrow, you can go see master." After Shaoqing left, Yi Xing lay on the bed and was lost in thought. Although this world where he could practice made him excited, he still hadn't recovered from the shock of suddenly coming to this world. It was really unbelievable that he would come to the Starland inexplicably. This was too inconceivable. Was it me who dreamed of the butterfly, or the butterfly who dreamed of me? Yi Xing thought of the story of Zhuang Zhou dreaming of the butterfly. He couldn't help but suspect that the him on the Starland was the real him, and the him on Earth was just a dream. However, Yi Xing quickly rejected this idea. He remembered everything that had happened on Earth very clearly. On the contrary, his memories of the star continent were very vague. He only remembered the events of the past few years. The more time passed, the more vague his memories became. It was impossible to remember clearly what happened in a dream, but not what happened in reality. Therefore, the him on Earth was definitely not a dream. Because of unknown reasons, his soul came to the Starland and possessed the body of this young man named Yi Xing. Yi Xing knew that he probably couldn't go back to Earth in this life. The most important thing should be the memories on the Starland. He wanted to be Yi Xing of the Ye family in the Starland, so he couldn't reveal any flaws. He began to recall, trying to integrate the memories of the original owner as much as possible. Unfortunately, the original owner's memories weren't much. He only got a few memories that were closely related to the original owner. He was the son of the head of the Ye family, Yi Feihong. His mother was the head of the Ye family, and her name was Lu Yi. Because he couldn't sense the power of the stars, he didn't learn any cultivation techniques. He only practiced a set of fist art, Bone Burst Fist. Bone Burst Fist was a low-grade martial art. It wasn't just a fist art, but also a body-refining technique. It could strengthen the bones through refining the fist. Strong bones were the foundation of a strong physique. As the saying goes, refine the bones first. Yi Xing couldn't sleep. Since he had nothing to do, he thought of the Bone Burst Fist. He got out of bed and performed a set of Bone Burst Fist. As he performed each move, the bones in his body also produced crisp sounds. Every crisp sound meant that his strength had been refined to a bone in his bones. After finishing a set of Bone Burst Fist, there were a total of 38 crisp sounds. Yi Xing remembered that the original owner's Bone Burst Fist was only trained to the level of 18 echoes. It seemed that he could sense the stars and absorb the power of the stars into his body. It strengthened his body and his bones more than doubled. The Bone Explosion Fist was the most common fist technique to strengthen one's body and bones. Even mortals who were unable to sense the stars knew how to use it. The fact that it was spread so widely showed that this fist technique had an extraordinary effect on strengthening one's body and bones. Bone Burst Fist had a total of 4 realms. The first realm was entry. This realm was the easiest to enter. As long as one could cultivate to the point of one crisp sound,
that is, to refine the power into a bone, it was considered entry.
The second realm was small success. Cultivating to the point of 30 crisp sounds was considered small success. This was a bit difficult. It was very difficult for mortals to reach this realm. Usually, only martial disciples who had stepped into the first stage of the martial path could reach this realm. The third realm was large success. Cultivating to the point of 70 crisp sounds was considered large success. Mortals who could reach this realm were very rare. Usually, only martial disciples who were at the second stage of the martial path could reach this realm. The fourth realm was great perfection. Cultivating to the point of 100 crisp sounds was considered great perfection. Mortals who could cultivate Bone Burst Fist to the great perfection realm were basically non-existent. Usually, only martial disciples who were at the third stage of the martial path could reach this realm. Yi Xing originally had 18 echoes, which was the entry realm. He had just reached 38 echoes, which was the small success realm. Of course, Yi Xing wasn't satisfied with just 38 echoes. Just now, he had practiced Bone Burst Fist once. All the moves of Bone Burst Fist were scanned into the superbrain. The superbrain immediately began to analyze each move and each move's effect on the bones. At the same time, the superbrain made adjustments to the moves to make the cultivation effect better.
Moreover, the superbrain found that Bone Burst Fist was far from being able to cultivate all the bones in the human body.
Thus, under Yi Xing's control, the superbrain used the original moves of Bone Burst Fist as a foundation to deduce some new moves. Originally, Bone Burst Fist had 27 moves. Each move could cultivate 3 to 4 bones. In total it could cultivate 100 bones. After the superbrain improved Bone Burst Fist, the number of moves increased to 36. Each move could cultivate 4 to 6 bones.
In total it could cultivate all 206 bones in the human body.
The superbrain had completely fused with Yi Xing's brain. The moves it deduced appeared directly in Yi Xing's mind. It was clear as day, and Yi Xing was overjoyed. What is this? Self-created martial arts? Ha ha ha!
The superbrain is indeed extraordinary. A normal explosive bone fist can only be cultivated to the limit of 100 bones, but the perfect explosive bone fist that the superbrain derived can be cultivated to the limit of 206 bones in the body.
I have to say, I'm a genius, ha ha ha. Yi Xing was very happy. He immediately began to cultivate the newly created perfect Bone Burst Fist in his room. After he finished executing the perfect Bone Burst Fist, the bones in Yi Xing's body rang 48 times. He had only practiced it once, but he had cultivated 10 more bones. The perfect Bone Burst Fist was indeed extraordinary. Not only could it cultivate all the bones in the human body, but it was also modified by the superbrain. The cultivation effect was also greatly increased. Of course, it did not mean that 10 more bones were cultivated to the correct position. It was just that the power had just been cultivated into the bones, so it was still a very dull sound. If the bones were really cultivated to the correct position, the sound they made would be very clear. At the same time they would also explode with great power. It was Yi Xing's first time in Star, so he did not feel sleepy at all. He was full of energy, so he practiced the perfect Bone Burst Fist again and again in his room. After one night, Yi Xing's perfect Bone Burst Fist had reached 72 echoes. This was only counting the dull sounds. Just the clear echoes alone had reached 46 echoes. So, he had not reached the realm of great success. However, in just one night, it was as if he had cultivated 8 bones. This was already very fast. It would not be long before Yi Xing's crisp echoes would exceed 70 echoes. At that time, the Bone Burst Fist would truly reach the realm of great success. After a night of cultivation, Yi Xing was sweating all over, but he was not sleepy at all. A new day had arrived. He was full of interest and passion for this strange world. Ah, young master, what happened to you? Why are you sweating all over? In the morning, when Shaoqing brought breakfast to Yi Xing's room, she was very surprised. I am in good spirits today. I woke up early and practiced a few sets of Bone Burst Fist. Yi Xing said indifferently. He did not mention anything about the matter of improving the Bone Burst Fist.
Since the Ye family had true martial artists who were at the 4th and 5th stage of the martial path, the Bone Burst Fist could only be cultivated to 100 bones.
It could be seen that improving the Bone Burst Fist was not an easy thing to do.
Especially to improve the Bone Burst Fist to the point of cultivating all 206 bones in the body, it was probably a heaven-defying move.
Yi Xing did not want to be in the limelight and be the center of attention the moment he arrived in Star. There would not be a good result if that happened. Robbing the recommendation ticket. Please add it if you like. Chapter 4. Yi Xing took a shower and changed his clothes. After breakfast, he followed Shaoqing to the main hall of the residence. Shaoqing notified Yi Xing first. After receiving permission, Yi Xing entered his parents' room at the back of the main hall. The mistress of the Ye family, Lu Yi, was lying on a luxurious bed. Beside her was a newborn baby. Lu Yi's attention was focused on the baby beside her. She did not notice Yi Xing's arrival. The head of the Ye family, Yi Xing, was standing beside the bed. His gaze was also on the baby. After glancing at Yi Xing, he shifted his gaze back to the baby. Beside Yi Feihong stood a beautiful young girl. When she saw Yi Xing, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. There was a hint of mockery in her eyes. Yi Xing recognized this young girl at a glance. She was the original owner's cousin, Lu Shuangling. She was also the original owner's fiancée. The original owner had lost his rationality because he saw her with the first elder's grandson, Yi Qing. In the end, he could not even defeat Yi Qing's younger brother, Yi Hu. In the end, he played to his strengths and competed with Yi Hu in rock climbing. He did not win. Instead, he fell and injured his head.
He died and his body was now occupied by Yi Xing. Father, mother.
Yi Xing had already prepared himself. He wanted to use the original owner's identity. When he saw Yi Feihong and Lu Yi, he called out without any hindrance. Hearing Yi Xing's voice, Lu Yi's gaze turned to Yi Xing. She smiled faintly and said, "Xinger, you're here. Come and see your little brother." Yi Xing walked forward to the bed. He looked at the baby on the bed and said, "What's your little brother's name?" He was someone who loved babies. Moreover, he was not the original owner. He did not care that his little brother would take everything away from him in the future. Therefore, he did not have any strange expression. His nickname is Yi Bao and his real name is Yi Chen. Lu Yi had a satisfied smile on her face. She was very satisfied that Yi Xing did not hate Yi Chen. After a pause, Lu Yi stopped smiling and continued, "Xing, I heard from Shaoqing that you sensed the power of the stars last night?" Yi Xing nodded. Lu Yi didn't show any joy. She calmly said, "Being able to sense the power of the stars means that you're no longer a cripple. However, you're already 16 years old, yet you're only able to sense the power of the stars. Your future achievements will be limited." When your younger brother was born, there was a natural phenomenon. There was starlight shining in the night sky. This is a sign that the stars are descending. In the future, he will definitely become an outstanding person. As the saying goes, the poor study while the rich practice martial arts. A strong physique required sufficient nutritional support. Not only did it require precious food that could greatly replenish one's qi and blood, it also required some medicinal herbs to nourish the body. Practicing martial arts required resources. Without a rich family background, it was impossible to afford it. In the past, Yi Xing was only a cripple. However, he was able to cultivate the explosive bone fist to the level of 18 echoes. It was far from what other mortals could compare with. Although this was related to his diligent cultivation, without food and medicinal herbs to replenish one's qi and blood, it was impossible for him to build a solid foundation. In the past, without medicinal herbs, Yi Xing's future would be cut off. No matter how much he cultivated, it would be difficult to improve the explosive bone fist. Even if he did not have enough nutrition, it would not be able to improve. As the son of the head of the family, Yi Xing had been allocated a lot of medicinal herbs. Now, Lu Yi wanted to take all of them back to her youngest son, Yi Chen. Obviously, she had completely given up on Yi Xing. No, in fact, Yi Xing was a cripple. In the hearts of Yi Xing and Lu Yi, they had already given up on him. All this time, they had been treating a dead horse as a living horse. This was why they had given a large amount of medicinal herbs to Yi Xing. Now that they had a second son, of course, they would do their best to nurture him. Although Yi Xing had already sensed the power of the stars, in the eyes of Yi Feihong and Lu Yi, it was already too late. They did not have the slightest bit of confidence in Yi Xing's future. "I have no objections." Yi Xing had already expected this result. His expression was normal.
He did not have any complaints in his heart. To be able to have a super brain was already a great blessing.
Who could compare to it? Why would Yi Xing be conflicted over that little bit of medicinal herbs? Yi Xing's carefree attitude surprised Yi Feihong and Lu Yi.
The two of them felt that they did not see through this son of theirs. However, this was also good. It was better to recognize reality than to be dissatisfied. Pretending to be generous.
Lu Shuangling, who was at the side, was a little unhappy. Perhaps it was because Yi Xing had been ignoring her since he came in.
She pursed her lips and said, "Cousin, don't think that just because you sense the power of the stars, you can cultivate smoothly. The power of the stars is endless, but a person's talent is limited. On the path of martial arts, resources are very important.
Don't you feel bad at all?" Yi Xing looked at Lu Shuangling. His eyes narrowed slightly.
He smiled and said, "Why would I feel bad for giving it to my brother?
It's not like I'm giving it to an outsider like you." Lu Shuangling's face turned green.
Since young, Yi Xing had always been around her.
Only she could talk about Yi Xing. When was it Yi Xing's turn to talk about her?
"Aunt, uncle, look at cousin, he said that I'm an outsider."
Lu Shuangling stomped her feet and pretended to cry. She brought out two big backers. "Xing, what are you talking about?"
"Shuangling is your cousin and your fiancé.
She's not an outsider," Lu Yi suddenly said with a straight face. Lu Shuangling was her niece. Of course, she couldn't let her be wronged.
"Fiancé."
Yi Xing's mouth showed a sneer.
The original owner regarded Lu Shuangling as a treasure, but she was not as good as a grass in his eyes.
"Yi Xing, a man should be more broad-minded.
Don't be so narrow-minded."
Yi Feihong also spoke. He naturally knew about the conflict between Yi Xing, Yi Qing, and Yi Hu.
He thought that Yi Xing was angry with Lu Shuangling and said, "Although Shuangling is your fiancée, she lives in a Ye family and should play with the children of the Ye family.
How can it only revolve around you?
You even fought with your cousin and competed in rock climbing.
In the end, not only did you lose, but you also fell unconscious. Don't you think you're shameful?"
As the head of the Ye family, Yi Feihong gave birth to a useless son. He had been criticized behind his back, so he didn't like Yi Xing very much in his heart. This time, Yi Xing and Yi Hu lost the rock climbing competition and fell unconscious. It became a joke in the Ye family. Yi Feihong's heart had been burning. However, Yi Xing had been in a coma. Yi Feihong had never had a chance to vent the anger in his heart. Later, when his youngest son Yi Chen was born, the anger in his heart was diluted by joy. Now, Yi Xing was in front of him. During the conversation, Yi Feihong remembered that Yi Xing fell unconscious while rock climbing. The anger in his heart rose again.
Yi Xing was speechless.
This cheap father of his was really interesting. His son's fiancée was dating another man, and he actually scolded his son for being narrow-minded and having to be more broad-minded?
Oh, Yi Xing quickly reacted. Shuangling and Yi Qing were dating.
That was only the original owner's opinion. Other people might not think so. In the original owner's memory, Shuangling and Yi Qing were flirting with each other. The relationship between the two was indeed not ordinary. That was why the original owner was so angry that he lost his mind. However, this matter was very difficult to explain. There was no real evidence. In the end, in other people's eyes, it was Yi Xing who was narrow-minded and felt inferior, so he was jealous. Moreover, the current Yi Xing was no longer the original Yi Xing. He had no intention of explaining it clearly. In short, he needed the original owner's identity. He would first stay in the Ye family. When his wings were strong, he would leave sooner or later.
Father's right. Yi Xing was not angry.
His expression was normal. It made Yi Feihong feel like he had punched cotton. The anger in his heart could not be vented. Without waiting for Yi Feihong to lecture him again, Yi Xing continued, "Father, I have already sensed the power of the stars, but I still don't know how to cultivate.
Please teach me."
Although Yi Xing had already learned the cultivation method of the 3 meridians from Shaoqing, it was still secretly learned. In order to avoid trouble, he had to learn a cultivation method in a legitimate way. Yi Feihong indeed had plans to continue teaching Yi Xing a lesson. However, after being rebuked by Yi Xing, he swallowed back his words. He took out a secret manual and threw it to Yi Xing, "Practice it well."
Yixing took the secret manual. On the cover were the words, Evergreen Technique. He knew that the Evergreen Technique was a low-level technique. The Ye family's warriors all cultivated this technique when they were at the martial disciple stage. The cultivation method that Yixing secretly learned from Shaoqing was the Evergreen Technique. However, Shaoqing's cultivation of the Evergreen Technique was too weak. The cultivation method of the 3 meridians was full of loopholes. Yixing only copied it and did not refer to the technique. Even if he had the superbrain, it would be difficult to restore the flawed Evergreen Technique. Now that he had the secret manual of the Evergreen Technique, it was different. With the precedent of the bone-exploding fist, Yixing believed that the superbrain would be able to perfect the Evergreen Technique. Thank you, Father. Yixing grabbed the Evergreen Technique and smiled from the bottom of his heart.
He said, Father, Mother, Yixing will take his leave first.
Aunt, Uncle, I will also go out. Lu Shuangling saw the situation and also walked out. Cousin, congratulations. You are 16 years old and you can finally feel the power of the stars. You are no longer a waste. Outside the main hall, Lu Shuangling caught up with Yixing and whispered in his ear, What a pity, you're both 16 years old, but brother Yixing is already a true martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path, while you've only just begun to sense the power of the stars. Haha. No matter how hard you work, you'll never be able to match brother Yixing. After saying this, Lu Shuangling let out a bell-like laughter and quickly walked away. 4th stage of the martial path? Yixing smiled. His goal was to become a martial saint, a peerless expert. Yixing was a mere 4th stage of the martial path. Yixing did not even have the thought of competing with him. Returning to his room, Shaoqing was waiting for him. Yixing chased her away and let her play by herself. After that, he took out the Evergreen Technique secret manual and read it page by page. Every time he read a page, the content would be scanned by Yixing and stored in his superbrain. Even if he were to spend his entire life, he would not be able to forget the content. New book, please recommend it. Chapter 5. Evergreen skill was an inferior martial art. It could open 3 meridians and allow the body to absorb the power of the stars. The evergreen skill Yixing learned from Shaoqing was incomplete. There were many loopholes in it, and it was not even half of what was written in the manual. Furthermore, even the evergreen skill manual was incomplete when it came to opening 3 meridians.
If one meridian was completely opened, then even if he mastered the evergreen skill, he would only be able to open around 80% of it.
Yixing scanned the contents of the evergreen skill into his superbrain and started to deduce it. The superbrain's deduction ability was indeed powerful.
With a theoretical knowledge of the evergreen skill as a foundation, and Yixing had already cultivated the evergreen skill before, the superbrain had the circulation model of the 3 meridians.
Soon, it was able to deduce the cultivation of the 3 meridians to 100%.
Other people could only open 80% of their meridians when they cultivated the evergreen skill, but Yixing could open 100% of it.
It was easy to imagine how effective the cultivation would be.
The difference between a completely open meridian and a meridian that was only 80% opened was definitely not as simple as a mere 20% increase.
In the same amount of time, Yixing's cultivation would definitely be much better than others. Besides, the superbrain's deduction did not stop at opening all the meridians. With the evergreen skill as a foundation, the superbrain quickly deduced the cultivation method of the 4th meridian. When the 4th meridian could be completely opened, the superbrain deduced the 5th meridian. In the end, the 5th meridian could be fully opened. Yixing tried, but he still could not deduce the 6th meridian. The superbrain's deduction ability might be powerful, but it did not have the cultivation knowledge of star.
The only reason it could deduce the evergreen skill to perfection was because of the foundation of the evergreen skill.
The evergreen skill was only an inferior martial art, and its foundation was limited. The fact that the superbrain could deduce the complete cultivation method of the 5 meridians based on the evergreen skill's foundation was already incredible. With each additional meridian, the cultivation effect would increase by leaps and bounds. The cultivation effect of 5 complete meridians was more than 10 times better than 3 meridians that were only 80% opened. Cultivating 5 meridians was already far beyond the scope of a low-grade cultivation technique. Even among middle-grade cultivation techniques, it was considered pretty good. Even the best middle-grade cultivation techniques could only cultivate 6 meridians. In other words, after the superbrain's deduction, evergreen skills grade had been forcefully increased by a level. It had gone from a low-grade martial art to a middle-grade martial art. For the Ye family of Qingye village, a middle-grade cultivation technique was already the peak of martial arts. Wanting to cultivate a middle-grade cultivation technique at the beginning of martial arts? Don't even think about it. No one would receive such treatment. But now, Yi Xing was receiving such treatment.
Although he had only sensed the power of the stars at the age of 16 and had just reached the first stage of the martial path, which was much later than the other children of the Ye family, his cultivation conditions were much better than the other children of the Ye family.
He was confident that he could surpass the other children of the Ye family. This was not difficult. It was just a matter of time. Moreover, it wouldn't take too long. Yi Xing sat cross-legged on his bed. He sensed the stars, circulated the evergreen skill, and began to cultivate. Faintly, he sensed a huge and dark star. He did not know what star it was, but he could feel that the star's power was surging. It was not something an ordinary star could compare to. The surging star's power came from the void and fell on Yi Xing's body. Then, it was absorbed by the 5 meridians in Yi Xing's body. It was refined into energy that nourished his flesh and bones. It was transported to every part of his body and strengthened it. The first time Yi Xing sensed the power of the stars, his cultivation was able to step into the first stage of the martial path. This was because the original owner had diligently cultivated and laid a solid foundation. Yi Xing sensed the power of the stars very surging. Moreover, Yi Xing had secretly learned Xiaoqing's cultivation method. Therefore, after accumulating a lot, his cultivation was able to step into the first stage of the martial path on the first night. He sensed the power of the stars. The first stage of the martial path was the beginning of the martial path. It was not difficult, but to cultivate to the second stage of the martial path was much more difficult. However, Yi Xing's cultivation method was the middle-rank evergreen skill. His cultivation speed was more than 10 times faster than the ordinary evergreen skill. It would not take him too long to cultivate to the second stage of the martial path. After 2 hours, Yi Xing stopped cultivating. He was only in the first stage of the martial path. His meridians could not withstand the power of the stars for too long. 2 hours was the limit. He needed at least 2 hours of physical energy before he could continue cultivating. Yi Xing naturally would not wait for 2 hours. He went to the backyard. These 2 hours were just right for him to cultivate the exploding bone fist. The exploding bone fist cultivated the bones, while the evergreen skill cultivated the meridians and flesh. The two did not conflict. Therefore, when he was tired from cultivating the evergreen skill, he could continue cultivating the exploding bone fist. Although the bones were not directly related to the martial path, the bones were the foundation of the body. Only strong bones could support the strong flesh. Therefore, the exploding bone fist was a must for martial disciples. Combined with the cultivation method, it was twice the result with half the effort. After cultivating the perfect exploding bone fist in the backyard for 2 hours, Yi Xing was already sweating profusely. He stopped and took a few breaths. Then he sat down on a flat stone beside the yard and continued cultivating the evergreen skill. The power of the stars was transmitted through the void. When cultivating, there was no difference between cultivating in a room or cultivating directly under the sky. Yi Xing cultivated in the backyard purely because he wanted to continue cultivating the exploding bone fist. Therefore, he was too lazy to return to his room. Not long after he started cultivating, the maid Xiaoqing came to find him. It was already lunchtime. Xiaoqing directly delivered the food. Fortunately, although his parents had transferred his medicinal resources to his younger brother, the food he ate did not change. What he ate in the past was still the same. It was all precious food that greatly nourished his blood. This saved Yi Xing a lot of trouble. Otherwise, if his nutrition could not keep up with his cultivation intensity, his body would not be able to last more than a few days. After lunch, Yi Xing ordered Xiaoqing to leave and not disturb him. After taking a walk in the backyard for 15 minutes, he continued cultivating the evergreen skill. After cultivating the evergreen skill for 2 hours, he cultivated the exploding bone fist for another 2 hours. The sky gradually darkened and it was already time for dinner. Yi Xing finished cultivating and returned to his room to take a bath. At this time, Xiaoqing had already delivered dinner to his room. For the whole day, all the food was delivered by Xiaoqing. Yi Xing did not even have the chance to eat with his parents. If it were the original owner, he would have been depressed. This situation had been going on for more than a month. However, for Yi Xing, He was happy to see this. Since his cheap parents did not like him, then it was better if he did not meet them. It would save him the trouble. For the whole day, if he was not cultivating the evergreen skill, then he was cultivating the perfect exploding bone fist. Even after dinner, Yi Xing cultivated the evergreen skill for 2 hours. It was very satisfying. Compared to the first night when he was full of energy, after cultivating for an entire day, Yi Xing was completely exhausted. After cultivating the evergreen technique for 2 hours, he collapsed onto his bed and fell into a deep sleep, snoring loudly. When he woke up the next morning, Yi Xing was full of energy again. The fatigue from yesterday was swept away in a deep sleep. In the morning, Yi Xing first cultivated in the backyard. He did not cultivate the evergreen skill or the exploding bone fist. Instead, he cultivated his explosive strength, reaction speed, and speed according to the scientific methods in the superbrain. Although strength was important, reaction speed and explosive speed were also important. They were closely related to actual combat ability. Before one could produce inner strength, there were no movement techniques to cultivate. Therefore, using scientific methods to cultivate explosive strength, reaction speed, and speed were very important. They were all compulsory lessons every day. 2 hours later, Yi Xing only stopped cultivating when Shaoqing delivered breakfast. After breakfast, Yi Xing asked Shaoqing to leave and asked her to come back for lunch. Then, he began to cultivate the evergreen skill. In the past, the original owner of the body had often trained this hard, so little Qing did not find it strange that Yi Xing was so hard-working. Yi Xing did not need her by his side, and she was happy to be free. In her free time, she would play with the maids she was close with. Only when she was in the mood would she occasionally cultivate the evergreen technique. Time passed. Yi Xing spent every day cultivating. Whether it was his martial arts cultivation or the strength of his bones, they were all increasing greatly. His strength was getting stronger every day. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. The Ye family was the ruler of Qingye village. The birth of the Ye family's second young master had caused countless guests to come to the Ye family to congratulate them. However, all the guests stopped at the main hall of the Patriarch Mansion. No one knew that in the past 5 days, in the backyard of the Patriarch Mansion, there was a 16-year-old youth who had been cultivating diligently every day and had made rapid progress in all aspects. Ha 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 ha. In the backyard of the Patriarch's residence, Yi Xing was practicing the perfect bone explosive fist. Every move and style was executed by him smoothly and fluidly. Every time he executed a move, there would be 2 or 3 sounds. Some were crisp sounds, and some were muffled sounds. After a short while, when he finished executing the perfect bone explosive fist, Yi Xing's face revealed a very happy smile. Just now he had counted. After executing the perfect bone explosive fist, there were a total of 108 sounds from the bones in his body. This meant that Yi Xing's strength had already reached 108 bones. This was a level that ordinary bone explosive fist could never achieve. In these 108 sounds, there were 72 crisp sounds and 36 muffled sounds. This meant that Yi Xing's bone explosive fist had reached the great accomplishment realm. Usually, only martial artists in the second stage of the martial path could cultivate the bone explosive fist to the great accomplishment realm. However, the cultivation effect of the perfect bone explosive fist was much higher than the ordinary bone explosive fist. Therefore, Yi Xing's cultivation in the first stage of the martial path had reached this step in just 5 days. Of course, the great accomplishment realm was only relative to the ordinary bone explosive fist. Compared to the perfect bone explosive fist that could cultivate 206 bones, 72 crisp sounds could only be considered as the small accomplishment realm. For any kind of martial arts, after cultivating to the great accomplishment realm, the difficulty of cultivating it would greatly increase. For example, under the third stage of the martial path, cultivating to the great accomplishment realm was basically the limit. Only after reaching the third stage of the martial path could one continue to cultivate and reach perfection. However, the perfect bone explosive fist was only considered to be at the small accomplishment realm. This meant that there was still a lot of room for improvement. Chapter 6. On the 6th day, 79 crisp sounds were heard. On the 7th day, 85 crisp sounds were heard. On the 8th day, 90 crisp sounds were heard. Every day, Yi Xing's perfect bone exploding fist improved. The number of bones he refined increased.
However, from the trend, the number of bones he refined decreased.
This meant that the further he progressed, the harder it would be to cultivate. 8 days later, his perfect bone exploding fist had improved tremendously. His cultivation of the evergreen technique was also progressing well.
He was getting closer and closer to the second stage of the martial path.
Yixing's muscles were much stronger than they were 8 days ago. They contained surging power. He felt like he could easily lift a few hundred kilograms. Especially in his dantian, the first star ring had turned from dim to resplendent. Vaguely, a blurry shadow of a second star ring could be seen outside the first star ring. If the second ring completely appeared, it meant that Yixing's cultivation had reached the second stage of the martial path. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to see the situation in their dantian. Even if they had condensed the second ring and reached the second stage of the martial path, they wouldn't know. They could only vaguely sense if their cultivation had increased. If they wanted to confirm, they would have to undergo a cultivation test. However, Yixing had the super brain to scan his body. Naturally, he knew what level his cultivation had reached.
Looking at the blurry image of the second ring in his dantian, it was obvious that he was very close to the second stage of the martial path.
This is the time to step into the second stage of the martial path. It was already late at night. Yixing had already eaten dinner. He sat cross-legged on the bed in his room and thought to himself. Soon, he calmed down and circulated the evergreen technique. The 5 meridians in his body began to absorb the power of the stars. Then, they refined it into energy that nourished his muscles and blood. The energy was then transported to various parts of his body through his meridians. Under the nourishment of the power of the stars, his muscles, blood, and blood were strengthened. Yixing's cultivation model appeared clearly in his super brain. He paid close attention to the scene in his dantian. The second ring gradually turned from blurry to clear. With each passing second, Yixing's muscles and blood grew stronger. The second star ring in his dantian grew clearer. His cultivation was also one step closer to the second stage of the martial path. About half an hour later, the second ring in Yixing's dantian was finally completely visible. Although it was still very dim compared to the first ring, it was enough to prove that Yixing's cultivation had once again taken a step forward, stepping into the second stage of the martial path. I finally broke through to the second stage of the martial path. In just 8 days, I stepped into the second stage of the martial path. Yixing was overjoyed. Compared to stepping into the first stage of the martial path in one night, reaching the second stage of the martial path in 8 days was even more difficult. Stepping into the first stage of the martial path was more or less due to the hard work of the original owner, who had built a solid foundation. However, from the first stage of the martial path to the second stage of the martial path, Yixing had relied entirely on his own efforts. After a few days, Yixing had merged more and more of the original owner's memories. He was very clear about the distance between the first stage of the martial path and the second stage of the martial path. Even among the descendants of the Ye family, Yiqing, who had the highest cultivation, seemed to have taken nearly a year. The other descendants of the Ye family basically took more than a year. Some even took more than 2 years. Compared to the time the other descendants of the Ye family took to reach the first stage of the martial path, Yixing only took 8 days. This was indeed unbelievably short. Yixing knew that even if the super brain perfected the evergreen technique, which was equivalent to a mid-grade technique, it shouldn't be this fast. It seemed that the stars he sensed were extraordinary. Astrology was also a large factor that affected one's cultivation speed.
If the stars sensed were of a higher grade, the power of the stars would surge and the cultivation speed would naturally be faster.
The first stage of the martial path has the strength of 200 to 300 pounds. The second stage of the martial path has the strength of 500 to 600 pounds. My explosive bone fist has been cultivated to 90 crisp sounds, almost reaching the perfection stage of the ordinary explosive bone fist. My true strength should be much stronger than the second stage of the martial path. I wonder if it can be compared to the third stage of the martial path, which has the strength of 1,000 pounds? Yixing felt the surging power in his body and couldn't help but compare it to the third stage of the martial path. Compared to ordinary people, the first stage of the martial path was already very powerful. Even if 3 to 5 people worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for the first stage of the martial path.
As for the second stage of the martial path, compared to ordinary people, they were even more of an expert.
They could easily throw an ordinary person far away like a sandbag. Even if 10 people joined hands, they still wouldn't be a match for them.
As for the third stage of the martial path, compared to ordinary people, they could be said to be a match for 100 people.
Their strength of 1,000 pounds was enough to injure or even kill an ordinary person. Although Yi Xing felt that he could easily surpass a martial disciple of the second stage of the martial path, compared to a martial disciple of the third stage of the martial path, there was still a lot of pressure. 100 people together, even if they were ordinary people, was not a small force. They were completely like a small army and were very difficult to deal with. A martial disciple of the third stage of the martial path was equivalent to a small army of 100 people. One could imagine how strong they were. Although my progress is very fast, compared to Yi Hu who is in the third stage of the martial path, I'm afraid that I'm still a little lacking. I still have to continue working hard. Yi Xing thought in his heart. He didn't relax just because his cultivation had reached the second stage of the martial path. Although he didn't see Yi Qing and Yi Hu as targets and didn't even have the intention to compare with them, he still had to use them as a reference. On the road of martial arts, Yi Xing had to step on them step by step. On the 9th day, cultivation was still the same. In the morning, he first practiced the evergreen technique, then practiced the explosive bone fist for 2 hours. It was the same in the afternoon. Today, his mastery of the explosive bone fist had increased again, reaching 94 crisp sounds. Compared to yesterday's 5 bones, the increase in speed was 1 less bone. At night, Yi Xing practiced the evergreen technique for another 2 hours. When he checked his dantian, he found that the second star ring was still as dim as before. The difficulty of going from the second stage of the martial path to the third stage was much higher than going from the first stage to the second stage. It could be seen that even if Yi Xing's cultivation speed was much faster than ordinary people, it was still impossible for him to go from the first stage to the second stage in just a few days. On the 10th day, the explosive bone fist had reached 98 crisp sounds. In Yi Xing's dantian, the second star ring seemed to have become more obvious, but it was still not obvious. On the 11th day, the explosive bone fist had reached 101 crisp sounds, successfully breaking through the 100 crisp sound barrier. According to the normal explosive bone fist, 100 crisp sounds was the realm of perfection, and 101 crisp sounds was already beyond perfection. The perfection of the explosive bone fist was a realm that only martial disciples of the third stage of the martial path could reach. After Yi Xing stepped into the second stage of the martial path, he reached it in just 3 days. However, Yi Xing wasn't too happy. Today, there were only 3 crisp sounds, and the cultivation speed of the explosive bone fist had decreased again. Yi Xing checked the star ring in his dantian and found that it was brighter than yesterday. However, at this speed, it would take at least a month for the second star ring to be as bright as the first star ring. As for condensing the third star ring and stepping into the third stage of the martial path, it would take even longer. The perfect explosive bone fist can cultivate a total of 206 bones, and I've only cultivated less than half of them. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a decrease in my cultivation speed. Yi Xing sat up straight, and his super brain worked at lightning speed. The problem doesn't lie with the perfect explosive bone fist, but with my body. That's right, my body's nutrition can't keep up with the pace of cultivation because I don't have any medicinal materials. Yi Xing thought. He immediately scanned his body with his super brain and checked his body's nutritional requirements. He found that it was indeed the case. Although Yi Xing ate precious food that replenished his blood and qi every day, it was still a little lacking compared to the nutrients required by the explosive bone fist. Moreover, because the explosive bone fist absorbed a lot of nutrients from his body, even the cultivation speed of the evergreen skill was affected. If I continue to cultivate like this, I can still reach the third stage of the martial path and cultivate the perfect explosive bone fist to perfection. However, I'm afraid that it will take a long time. No, I heard that the main house will send a messenger next month to select the genius disciples of the Ye family from Greenleaf Village to go to the main house in Azure Sky City. This is my chance to leave this place and go to a wider world. I must seize it. I must strive to reach the third stage of the martial path by this month and cultivate the perfect explosive bone fist to perfection. This way, I will need medicinal materials. If the family can't provide me with medicinal materials, I will find them myself. Soon, Yi Xing made a decision in his heart. He wanted to leave Greenleaf Village and go to the Azure Sky mountain range. He would search for medicinal materials and cultivate at the same time. His superbrain had scanning and long-range vision. The effect of searching for medicinal materials would be much better than others. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to find medicinal materials.
As long as he had the help of medicinal materials, the cultivation of his explosive bone fist and evergreen skill would greatly increase. At that time, he would definitely be able to seize the opportunity to leave Greenleaf Village and explore a wider world. The main house of the Ye family in Azure Sky City had a higher level of martial arts and stronger martial artists.
That was the place Yixing wanted to go. On the 12th day, after Yixing had breakfast, he told Shaoqing to go out for a walk and left the main house. He went out to search for medicinal materials. Since Yixing and Lu Yi had decided to give his medicinal materials to Yi Chen, then Yixing didn't need to greet them. The Azure Sky mountain range was very vast and boundless. No one knew how big it was, and there were powerful savage beasts living there. Going to the Azure Sky mountain range to search for medicinal materials wasn't a safe thing to do. Therefore, he had to make some preparations. After Yixing left the main house of the Ye family, he didn't go directly to the Azure Sky mountain range. Instead, he went to the market in the town center. Martial disciples didn't have inner energy. It was difficult to kill savage beasts with pure strength. Therefore, he needed a weapon. Yixing didn't have a weapon himself and didn't want to ask Yi Feihong for one. As the young master of the Ye family, he naturally had a way to get one. Greenleaf Village wasn't very big. Yixing had only walked through one street when he saw a weapon shop in front of him. He walked over with large strides. New book. Please recommend it. Chapter 7. It was difficult for a martial artist to fight against a beast with just their body. Therefore, a weapon was a necessity for every martial artist. If a martial disciple who had yet to become a true martial artist went to a mountainous area where beasts ran rampant, then they would need a weapon even more. Therefore, weapons were a big industry in the martial artist world. They were on par with the medicine industry. The weapon shop that Yixing entered was called Ye's Weapon Shop. It was the business of the Ye family. It was also the biggest weapon shop in Greenleaf Village, occupying almost 60% of the market. There were all kinds of weapons like swords, knives, spears, swords, staffs, etc. Although Yixing was the young master of the Ye family, he wasn't liked by his parents. He didn't have much pocket money, and he didn't ask his parents for it. Therefore, he couldn't afford to buy a good weapon, so he could only borrow it. No matter how much he wasn't liked by his parents, he was still the son of the head of the Ye family. Even if he didn't give face to the monk, he still had to give face to the Buddha. With his cheap father's face, borrowing a weapon from Ye's weapon shop was naturally not a problem. At most, the news would reach Yixing's ears and make him angry. However, by that time, Yixing would have already entered the Green Cloud Mountain range. He didn't care whether Yi Feihong was angry or not. When Yixing came out of the Green Cloud Mountain range, he had full confidence that with his far-sighted and scanning eyes, he would definitely be able to earn enough money for 2 weapons. Young Master Yixing. When Yixing entered Ye's weapon shop, a shop assistant came over to greet him. Although it was Yixing's first time in Ye's weapon shop, as a servant of the Ye family, the shop assistant naturally recognized the son of the head of the Ye family. As for those who looked down on Yixing's crippled body, that was only limited to some people in the main branch of the Ye family. For the servants, no matter how crippled Yixing was, he was still the young master of the Ye family. He was the son of the head of the family. He was a high and mighty existence, so they didn't dare to slight him. Yixing nodded with an easygoing expression. He instructed the shop assistant beside him, "Take me to see if there are any good bows in the shop. Introduce them to me." The first floor is filled with swords and sabers. The bows and arrows are on the second floor. Young Master Yixing, please follow me. The waiter led the way in front, leading Yixing through the lobby on the first floor to the second floor. Yo! Isn't this cousin Yixing? Before Yixing reached the second floor, a young man who was 1 or 2 years younger than Yixing came down the stairs. When he saw Yixing, he shouted with an exaggerated expression. The Ye family had a big business and many brothers and sisters. Of course, they were not blood-related. They were all cousins. However, even if they were cousins, no one would deliberately refer to each other as cousins and call each other as brothers and sisters. This young man especially emphasized the words, "Cousin Yixing." Anyone could see that this wasn't out of respect for Yixing, but a kind of mockery. "Young Master Yi Hu,
The waiter who led Yi Xing up saw this and bowed to the young man at the top of the stairs, saying, "Young Master Yi Xing has come to see the bows and arrows." Then he continued to say to Yi Xing, "Young Master Yi Xing, please." Yi Xing and Yi Hu competed in rock climbing. In the end, Yi Xing fell unconscious. This was something that everyone in Qingye village knew. Everyone knew that Yi Xing and Yi Hu did not get along. Yi Xing glanced at Yi Hu indifferently, and then continued to walk to the second floor with a normal expression. Seeing Yi Xing so calm, Yi Hu was a bit surprised. If it was in the past, Yi Xing would have been angry long ago. The surprise in his heart was ignored by Yi Hu in an instant. He revealed a mocking smile, saying, "See the bows and arrows? Hee, cousin Yi Xing, with your small body, can you draw the bow and shoot an arrow?" As he spoke, Yi Hu turned around and returned to the second floor. Originally he was about to leave, but when he saw Yi Xing, he was like a cat that smelled blood, unwilling to leave. Drawing the bow and shooting an arrow was not difficult. Not all bows were strong. Even Yi Xing in the past could draw a large bow with the strength of one stone when he trained the explosive bone fist to 18 echoes. The strength of one stone was equivalent to 120 kilograms. A normal person would not be able to draw it. When Yi Hu said that Yi Xing could not draw the bow and shoot an arrow, he did not mean that Yi Xing could not do it. Instead, he was mocking Yi Xing for his small strength. There were only a few people in the Ye family who dared to mock Yi Xing, and Yi Hu was one of them. In terms of background, he was the grandson of the great elder. In terms of cultivation, he was in the third stage of the martial path. More importantly, he was only 14 years old. There was hope that he could be like his brother Yi Qing and step into the fourth stage of the martial path before the age of 16 and become a true martial artist. As for Yi Xing, he did not put Yi Hu in his eyes. He only treated him as a fly buzzing beside him. Yi Xing did not even look at ordinary bows. He walked directly to a row of strong bows with a strength of at least one stone. He pointed at a bow with a strength of 6 stones and said, "Let me see this one." The shop staff was only responsible for receiving customers. As for how to buy and sell, there were people selling at each counter. The person in charge of this row of strong bows was a man in his 30s. His name was Lu Daxiong, and he was in the third stage of the martial path. When he saw that Yi Xing wanted to see the 6-stone bow, he could not help but be surprised. Wasn't Yi Xing a cripple? Lu Daxiong said, "Young Master Yi Xing, this iron bow is a 6-stone bow. It requires 720 pounds of strength to draw it." "That's it." Yi Xing nodded. Perhaps young Master Yi Xing was just looking at it. Lu Daxiong thought in his heart and handed the iron bow to Yi Xing. At this moment, Yi Hu burst into laughter. The mockery in his eyes was completely exposed. He said, "Yi Xing, you think you can open an iron bow with the strength of 6 stones? Ha ha." Before Yi Hu could finish laughing, Yi Xing had already taken the iron bow in his hands. He took a deep breath and pulled the iron bow into a full moon. Everyone's expression instantly turned into shock. Yi Hu's smile also froze on his face at this moment. Yi Xing pulled the iron bow and put it away. With his strength, pulling the iron bow was easy. If he used all his strength, pulling an 8-stone or 9-stone bow was not impossible. However, it was not easy to pull an overly strong bow. It was impossible to use it continuously. Therefore, the most practical bow was the kind that could be used continuously but had enough strength. This iron bow with the strength of 6 stones was just right for him. Humph. Hold your breath and use all your strength to pull the bow once. It's nothing. Yi Hu pursed his lips and said unhappily. However, his eyes were still filled with surprise. Even if Yi Xing used all his strength to pull the iron bow, it meant that Yi Xing had a lot of strength. This was much stronger than Yi Xing's strength in his impression. "I'll take it. Big brother, can I trouble you to give me another 20 good arrows?" Yi Xing smiled at the man selling the bow. As for Yi Hu, he continued to ignore him. Young Master Yi Xing has great strength. Lu Daxiong praised, but he was not too surprised. After all, even if he had a crippled body, he could still have the strength of 1,000 jin. He could be compared to a martial disciple of the third stage of the martial path. Although he was surprised that Yi Xing could pull the iron bow, it was not to the point of disbelief. Lu Daxiong smiled and said, The azure gold arrows are very strong and have a strong penetrating power. They are suitable for a strong bow like the iron bow. Since there were bows for sale, there were naturally arrows and quiver. Seeing that Yi Xing did not have a quiver, Lu Daxiong chose a good quiver for Yi Xing. The iron bow is 6,000 taels, the azure gold arrows are 10 taels each, and the quiver is 30 taels. Young Master Yi Xing, the total is 6,230 taels. Let's forget about the 30 taels change. This quiver is for young Master Yi Xing. Let's count it as 6,200 taels. Lu Daxiong put the 20 azure gold arrows into the quiver and placed it on the counter. He looked at Yi Xing with a smile. 6,200 taels? Hee hee. Yi Hu's mocking laughter came again. Obviously, he understood Yi Xing very well and knew that Yi Xing would not give Yi Xing so much money. Yi Hu's judgment was correct. Yi Xing really did not have that much money, but he did not panic and said, "Let's go." "Brother, I don't have that much money right now. Let me borrow this bow for a month. After a month, I will pay you double the price." Lu Daxiong's expression was a little awkward. 6,000 taels was not a small sum. However, the person who borrowed it was Yi Xing, the son of the Ye family's head. With the face of the Ye family's head, what was a mere 6,000 taels? Therefore, in just a moment, the awkward expression on Lu Daxiong's face disappeared. He had already made his decision. However, before he could speak, Yi Hu had already pressed down the quiver on the counter and said, "Oh, you really don't have that much money. Oh, you really don't have any money, haha. Yi Xing, even though my Yi clan is a big family, and a mere 6,000 taels of silver is nothing, but we still have rules and regulations. If everyone was like you, and came to the weapons store to buy weapons without spending any money, and all came to borrow, then wouldn't my Yi clan be starving? What do you want?" Yi Xing looked coldly at Yi Hu. Previously, he ignored Yi Hu as if he was a fly because Yi Hu's mockery did not affect him. However, it was different now. He needed the bow to go to Mount Qingyun and Yi Hu's actions had already blocked his path. "What? Heh. If you want this bow, either buy it with money or put it down and get lost." Yi Hu said coldly, his gaze fixed on Yi Xing. "Young masters, please calm down. Young Master Yi Xing, don't make things difficult for young Master Yi Xing. I, Lu Daxiong, will pay for this bow. Consider it a gift from me to young Master Yi Xing. Please don't fight over this matter." Seeing that Yi Xing and Yi Hu were glaring at each other, sparks flying from their gazes, Lu Daxiong's expression turned anxious as he hurriedly said, "If these two young masters were to fight here, no matter what the result was, he would be implicated when the family investigates. He might as well spend some money and directly give the bow to Yi Xing. As long as he could resolve this dispute, it would be fine." After the news reached the family head's ears, Yi Feihong would know that he spent 6,000 taels to protect his son's safety. He would definitely look at him in a new light. As long as he entered Yi Feihong's eyes, 6,000 taels would be worth it. For Lu Daxiong to do this, it could be said that in order to avoid this dispute, he had already done his best. Unfortunately, the anger between Yi Xing and Yi Hu had already ignited. How could it be extinguished so easily? Yi Hu's hand did not move away from the quiver. Instead, he grabbed the iron bow in Yi Xing's hand and said, "I said no, it means no, give it to me. Morning, please recommend me." Chapter 8. Get Lost. Even though Yi Xing was too lazy to lower himself to Yi Hu's level, he was still angry and threw a punch at Yi Hu's palm. Yi Xing's body emitted a crackling sound as he used the bone-exploding fist. Even though Yi Hu was younger than him by 2 years, he was still a third-stage martial disciple and was not easy to deal with. Yi Xing used the power of the bone-exploding fist to its limit. However, 101 crisp sounds rang out at the same time. It sounded like a series of crackling sounds and no one could tell how many there were. "You dare to fight me?" Seeing Yi Xing make a move, Yi Hu's eyes lit up and his face showed disdain. He shouted, "You're the one who should get lost." While shouting, Yi Hu's palm turned into a fist and the same crackling sound came from his body. He also used the bone-exploding fist. Bang! The two fists collided and a muffled sound rang out. Yi Hu's expression instantly turned into shock. His fist retracted as if it had been electrocuted and his body retreated 3 steps. In terms of cultivation,
Yi Xing was at the second stage of the martial path while Yi Hu was at the third stage. However, Yi Hu's mastery of the explosive bone fist was only at the third stage of the martial path. His mastery of the explosive bone fist was only at the large success stage. Compared to Yi Xing's explosive bone fist, Yi Hu's strength was far inferior. Overall, Yi Xing's fist was stronger. Good. Yi Xing, I haven't taught you a good lesson before. Today, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Yi Hu's face swelled red as he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He couldn't accept that he was beaten back by Yi Xing with a single punch. In his opinion, the reason why he was at a disadvantage was because Yi Xing took the initiative. He hastily changed his palm into a fist and didn't have time to use his full strength. Now, he was ready to beat this trash until he was looking for his teeth on the ground. It didn't matter if he was the son of the patriarch or not. Yi Hu shouted and another burst of sound came from his body as he punched towards Yi Xing. Yi Xing snorted.
With his bone-exploding fist that surpassed perfection, he really did not fear a martial disciple who had just entered the third stage of the martial path.
What's more, Yi Xing hadn't used his superbrain scanning ability yet. Once he did, he would be able to see through Yi Hu's flaws. Even if Yi Hu was at the peak of the third stage of the martial path, Yi Xing wasn't afraid of him. Bone Explosion Fist. Yi Xing wanted to test out the power of the perfect bone-exploding fist. Like a needle against an awl, he sent out a punch to counter Yi Hu's attack. However, before it could collide with Yi Xing's fist, Yi Xing's arm suddenly retracted, and his fist was pulled back. At this moment, two large hands suddenly grabbed from the side. One of them grabbed Yi Hu's hand, while the other grabbed nothing but air. Yi Fighting's heart skipped a beat. Yi Xing was actually able to dodge his attack, which surprised him. Who dares to stop me? Yi Hu's wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. He roared angrily and pulled his arm back. Unfortunately, his wrist didn't move at all. Third Elder. A series of respectful voices came from the side. The martial artists of the Ye family were all respectful to the middle-aged man who grabbed Yi Hu. Third Elder Yi. Even the guests in the restaurant were very respectful to this person. The Ye family was the #1 martial arts family in Greenleaf Village. Moreover, the main family had a huge influence in Azure Sky City. The Ye family's third elder was a big figure who could shake Greenleaf Village with a stomp of his foot. Third elder. Yi Hu was shocked and immediately calmed down. The third elder was a true martial artist. Moreover, his cultivation was at the peak of the fourth stage of the martial path. He was half a step into the fifth stage of the martial path. The third stage of the martial path and the fourth stage of the martial path was a watershed. In front of the fourth stage of the martial path, he had no ability to resist. Of course, the third elder's cultivation wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that the third elder was the younger brother of the family head. Yi Xing was the third elder's nephew. In front of everyone, if he beat up Yi Xing, the third elder might punish him even more. Although he was also the third elder's nephew, he wasn't the third elder's nephew. He was only a cousin. There was still a difference. This made him feel lucky that he didn't really beat up Yi Xing. At the same time, he secretly blamed himself. The weapon store was managed by the third elder. It was unwise to fight with Yi Xing here. Yi Hu decided that if he wanted to teach Yi Xing a lesson in the future, he would find a safe place. After beating him up, he would run back to his grandfather's place. His grandfather was the first elder, a martial artist of the fifth stage of the martial path. With his grandfather's protection, even if he beat up Yi Xing, he wouldn't receive any serious punishment. Third elder. Yi Xing also slightly nodded to Yi Fighting. Although Yi Fighting was Yi Xing's uncle, because Yi Xing had a crippled body, Yi Fighting didn't pay much attention to him. Their relationship wasn't very close. In the past, Yi Xing also called Yi Fighting the third elder. It wasn't strange for Yi Xing to continue calling him that. What's the matter with you two? You're brothers and yet you're still fighting. What a joke. Yi Fighting let go of Yi Hu's wrist and glared at both of them. He didn't take sides. When Yi Hu was mocking and ridiculing Yi Xing, a worker in the store was afraid that the two young masters would cause a ruckus in the store, so he went to inform Yi Fighting. That was why Yi Fighting had rushed over. Otherwise, Yi Fighting wouldn't normally be in the weapons store. Instead, he would be in the courtyard behind the weapons store.
Third elder, Yi Xing doesn't have money, but wants to borrow a bow worth more than 6,000 taels of silver. If everyone does this, then wouldn't the entire weapon store be lent out? My Ye family would have to eat the northwest wind. My Ye family is a large family and has rules and regulations. The weapons in the store can only be bought and not lent. So, I firmly opposed it, but Yi Xing attacked me. Yi Hu said loudly. He believed that he was in the right, and his tone was agitated. After 1 month, I will pay double the price, Yi Xing said indifferently. Regarding the ins and outs of the matter, a worker had already whispered into Yi Fighting's ear. Yi Fighting put his hands behind his back and said, "You're all members of the Ye family. A mere 6,000 taels of silver is enough to make you fight over it. How disappointing." After scolding both of them, Yi Fighting looked at Lu Daxiong and said, "Lu Daxiong." Lu Daxiong immediately nodded and said, "Third elder." Yi Fighting said, "It's not bad that you're willing to bear the losses in order to resolve their conflict. However, you don't need to spend money on this set of bows. Put it on my tab." I gave it to Yi Xing. Lu Daxiong said respectfully, "Yes, third elder." Yi Fighting's attitude surprised Yi Xing. It seemed that the original owner didn't know his uncle well. From the looks of it, Yi Fighting treated his nephew quite well. "Thank you, uncle." Yi Xing wasn't a cold person. Since Yi Fighting treated him well, he naturally wouldn't call him third elder. Uncle and nephew seemed distant. After this injury, you're different from before. Yi Fighting looked at Yi Xing. In the past, Yi Xing was very submissive in front of him and didn't dare to speak much. He patted Yi Xing's shoulder and said, "That's good." Finished speaking, Yi Fighting turned and left. Yi Xing snorted and glared fiercely at Yi Xing. He went downstairs with an ugly expression. "Young Master Yi Xing." Lu Daxiong handed the quiver over to Yi Xing. There were 20 azure gold arrows inside. Yi Xing first tied the quiver to his back, then slung the iron bow over his body and went downstairs. On the first floor of the weapon store, Yi Xing bought a sharp dagger. This didn't cost much silver. Yi Xing could afford it himself. After leaving the weapon store, Yi Xing bought some medicine from a medicine store. He then left Qingye village and headed towards the Green Cloud Mountains. The Green Cloud Mountains was a huge mountain range. It was boundless. Qingye village's martial artists had only explored a small area. Qingye village was a mountainous area. Less than 1 li away from the village, there were many mountain ridges. When Yi Xing entered the mountain range, he was like a drop of water falling into the sea. He seemed very small and insignificant. The real Green Cloud Mountains were lofty mountains and steep ridges. Ordinary mountain ridges couldn't compare to them. Only the lofty mountains and steep ridges of the Green Cloud Mountains could give birth to ferocious beasts. The wild beasts in ordinary mountain ridges could only be considered small animals. They couldn't be compared to vicious beasts. Yi Xing crossed mountain ridges one after another. After walking for 10 li, he finally arrived in front of a lofty mountain ridge. Compared to the mountain ridge under Yi Xing's feet, the lofty mountain ridge in front of him was at least twice as tall. This was the Green Cloud Mountains. No, it could only be considered a branch of the Green Cloud Mountains. The real Green Cloud Mountains were too vast. No one knew where it ended. It was said that in the depths of the mountain range, there were even taller mountain ridges and super vicious beasts comparable to martial saints. Yi Xing wasn't in a hurry to enter the Green Cloud Mountains. Instead, he stopped in a forest at the foot of the mountain range. He had to familiarize himself with the bow and arrow. On Earth he was an excellent archer. His favorite sport was archery. He was almost always a perfect shot. There was once an archer who claimed to have won the national shooting championship. He competed with him, but the archer lost miserably. Because of this, he later played as a hunter in the virtual game Xuanhuan World. With a longbow in hand, he traveled the world alone. When it came to archery, he had an extraordinary talent. This talent came from his soul. Even if he changed his body, his talent was still there. Moreover, his current body was much stronger than his body on Earth. His arm strength was more than 10 times stronger. Arm strength was an extremely important requirement for an archer. Eyesight was also one of the important requirements for an archer. Yi Xing had fused with the superbrain. His eyes could see far and scan. His eyesight was more superior than anyone else's.
Yi Xing's arm strength and eyesight were more than 10 times stronger than those on Earth. Therefore, he could better display his shooting talent in the star continent. Yi Xing chose a tree as thick as a thigh as his target. He made a mark on the tree trunk. Then, he walked 100 meters away, took out the iron bow, and pulled out an azurite arrow. Draw the bow and shoot. Whoosh, with a piercing sound, the azure gold arrow shot out and flashed through the void. In the blink of an eye, the azurite arrow was firmly nailed to the tree trunk. As a 6-spickle strong bow, the iron bow was extraordinary. The arrows that Yi Xing shot on Earth couldn't reach a distance of 100 meters, let alone hit a target from 100 meters away. However, Yi Xing's target wasn't just the tree. It was the mark on the tree trunk. He immediately looked at it with his telescopic vision. Chapter 9. Yi Xing had tested the limits of his long-range vision, and it was enough to see things 10 miles away. It was only 100 meters, but under Yi Xing's long-range vision, it was naturally as if it was right in front of him. From afar, it seemed that the place where the arrow disappeared was not far from his mark, but after looking closely, it was actually about 2 palms away. Compared to the body of a human or a fearsome beast, the distance between 2 palms was not far, but in terms of vital points the range of 2 palms was very large. Take fearsome beasts for example. They were strong and vigorous, and if the arrow did not hit their vital points, it would be very difficult to kill them. For an archer who took people's lives with his bow and arrow, not only did he not miss, but he also had to shoot where he wanted to. This was a true godly archer. Although Yi Xing was very talented in shooting and had the best conditions, he was not a godly archer the moment he got the bow and arrow in his hands. He still had to practice. Looking at the tree trunk 100 meters away, Yi Xing took out another azurite arrow and pulled the bowstring again. Whoosh, the azurite arrow shot out instantly, and in the blink of an eye, it hit the tree trunk 100 meters away. This time, Yi Xing's eyesight had improved by more than 10 times, and the result was much better than the first arrow. However, because of the strength and the direction of the wind, it was still a distance of a fist away from the mark he drew. For a person who used the bow for the first time, this result was heaven-defying. Even an archer who had spent years of hard work might not be able to do better than Yi Xing. The most important reason for this was Yi Xing's long-range vision. For an archer who had spent years of hard work to improve their archery skills, it was extremely difficult. Yi Xing was just a beginner, and there was a lot of room for improvement. Yi Xing took out the third azurite arrow and retracted his long-range vision, maintaining his normal state. During practice, Yi Xing did not intend to use his long-range vision, and he would practice in his normal state. If his accuracy improved in his normal state, then when his long-range vision was ignored, it would naturally be more accurate. Whoosh, whoosh, arrow after arrow. Yi Xing only stopped when he shot the 10th arrow and walked forward. After some adjustments, Yi Xing had made great progress. The 10th arrow was already within a palm's range of the mark. Walking in front of the tree, Yi Xing pulled out the 10 azure gold arrows, then walked 100 meters away and continued to practice. Yi Xing had 20 azure gold arrows. 10 of them were used for practice, and the other 10 were not used for the time being. Those were the real weapons for hunting ferocious beasts, and he could not afford to lose their sharpness. Every time Yi Xing shot 10 arrows, he would pull them out one by one and continue with the next round of practice. Yi Xing repeated this process 10 times. He had drawn the bow more than 100 times. Only then did he feel the soreness in his arms. Drawing the bow once while shooting was much more difficult than drawing the bow in the weapons store. In the weapons store, Yi Xing only needed to draw the bow for a split second before releasing the bowstring. But when shooting there was a process of aiming. During this time, he needed to draw the bow continuously, and his hands could not tremble. Under this condition, the strength needed to draw the bow once was equivalent to drawing the bow 5 times. In other words, Yi Xing could shoot hundreds of arrows, but it was equivalent to drawing the bow 500 times. Even if he had trained the bone-exploding fist to 101 crisp sounds, and his bones were very strong, it was still a bit unbearable. In terms of bones, he was stronger than a martial disciple of the 3rd stage of the martial path, but in terms of muscles, he was much weaker. When his bones were a bit unbearable, his muscles were already very sore. Yi Xing stopped practicing archery, put away the arrows, and found a clean place to sit down and practice the evergreen technique. 2 hours later, under the nourishment of the power of the stars,
Yixing's bones and muscles returned to normal. They were no longer sore, and even a bit stronger. He continued to practice archery. When he was hungry, Yixing hunted wild beasts in the nearby mountains and roasted them. When night fell, he dug a small cave to rest and blocked the entrance with a huge rock. 2 days later, Yixing didn't know how many times he had practiced. His archery skills had increased by a lot. At a distance of 100 meters, Yixing didn't even need to use his vision to shoot the arrows into the mark. If he used his vision to shoot the arrows, they would hit the center of the mark without missing a single time. Even if Yixing retreated another 50 meters, with a distance of 150 meters, he would still be able to accurately shoot the arrows into the mark. In terms of direct shooting, Yixing was much better than archers who spent their lives studying archery. He was a godly archer with superb archery skills. In these 2 days, Yixing would sometimes practice the bone-exploding fist, but the progress was not very fast. The crisp sound only reached 105 echoes, which only increased by 4 echoes in 2 days. On the 3rd day, Yixing carried a quiver of arrows and an iron bow and stepped into the tall mountains in front of him. He entered the Azure Cloud mountain range. With his archery skills, as long as he didn't encounter extremely high-level vicious beasts, he could easily kill them. Moreover, with his vision, even if there were extremely high-level vicious beasts, Yixing would be able to detect them from afar and avoid them in advance. With strong vision and superb archery skills, Yixing's survival ability in the mountains was even higher than a real martial artist. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the king of the jungle. The Azure Cloud mountain range was completely different from an ordinary mountain range. There were taller peaks, steeper cliffs, bigger trees, and more beautiful flowers. Even if Yixing had extremely strong vision and could see far, he was still very cautious when walking in the Azure Cloud mountain range. Although he had the qualifications to be the king of the jungle, it was his first time entering a real mountain range. He didn't have such an experience on Earth, and in the fantasy world, it was after all a game. Yixing first climbed up a peak and looked into the distance, observing his surroundings. The range of his vision was limited, so his vision was still blocked. There were many areas that he couldn't see. Even so, he still saw several vicious beasts within a 10-mile radius. A black-maned tiger, a large clawed lynx, a large-toothed long-haired boar, and a colorful python. As for ordinary beasts, there were even more of them. After observing for a while, Yixing chose his target. It was the large-toothed long-haired boar. It wasn't because it was easy to hunt, nor was it because it was valuable, but because Yixing saw a precious medicinal herb near it, Chinese knotweed. The large-toothed long-haired boar wasn't a good target to hunt. As a vicious beast, it was fundamentally different from ordinary wild beasts. Its fur was very thick and could block weapons like swords and sabers. Even sharp arrows wouldn't be able to seriously injure it. Its head was as hard as copper and indestructible. Even a sharp arrow shot from a 6-pickle-strong bow would only be able to pierce its scalp. Moreover, its huge teeth were very sharp, and it was very powerful. Its attack power was very high. Even if a real martial artist encountered it, they would have to take a detour. However, to Yixing, as long as there was a flaw, it would be his target. The large-toothed long-haired boar's flaw was its ears. When its ears were erect, an arrow could be shot through the hole in its ear and pierce its head. 2 hours later, Yixing avoided all kinds of wild beasts and poisonous insects and arrived at the territory of the large-toothed long-haired boar. He slowly approached the boar from the side. Yixing was about 100 meters away from the large-toothed long-haired boar when the boar, which had been lying on the ground, suddenly raised its head and pricked up its ears. Its hearing was very sensitive, and it also sensed a trace of danger. However, this action of his had cost him his life. Whoosh! The moment the large-toothed long-haired boar pricked up its ears to listen, a green light suddenly shot out from the trees beside it. It was a green-gold arrow. In the blink of an eye, the green-gold arrow shot into the ear of the boar. The penetrative power of an arrow shot from a 6-pickle bow was terrifying. The ear was the weakest point of the large-toothed long-haired boar's defense. This green-gold arrow directly entered the ear and pierced its head. The large-toothed long-haired boar howled like a pig being slaughtered, and its body immediately fell to the ground and struggled. The vitality of a ferocious beast was very strong. Even if its head was pierced, the large-toothed long-haired boar still struggled for a while before it stopped, twitching non-stop. When Yixing came to its side,
the large-toothed long-haired boar actually moved again. It jumped up and charged at Yi Xing, but it was too late. It just got up and fell down again, unable to get up again. Yi Xing immediately dug out the Chinese knotweed. This Chinese knotweed was quite old and was quite valuable.
Even in the medicinal resources given to him by his parents, there was no such precious herb.
After putting away the Chinese knotweed, Yi Xing pulled out the green-gold arrow from the boar's head. The arrowhead was green and was highly toxic. Otherwise, the boar's last breath would not have missed Yi Xing's clothes. The carcass of the large-toothed long-haired boar was also very valuable. It was not much less valuable than the Chinese knotweed, but Yi Xing did not pay it any mind. Instead, he quickly left the place.
If he wanted to turn the carcass of the large-toothed long-haired boar into money, he would have to transport it to Greenleaf Village.
Not only would it take a lot of time and effort, its carcass would also easily attract other ferocious beasts.
Moreover, the roar of the large-toothed long-haired boar just now must have attracted the nearby ferocious beasts.
This place would become a dangerous place. The further away, the better. During the day, Yi Xing searched for herbs and hunted ferocious beasts. After obtaining the herbs, he would find a safe place to cultivate. At night, Yi Xing would dig a small cave in the mountains. He would use a large rock to seal the cave entrance and pass the time in the cave.
In the blink of an eye, several days had passed.
Yi Xing had a harvest every day. There was an endless supply of herbs, and most of them were precious herbs. When he was hungry, he would eat the meat of ferocious beasts. When he was thirsty, he would drink the blood of ferocious beasts.
Moreover, with the assistance of precious herbs, whether it was the cultivation of the evergreen technique or the explosive bone fist, his progress in these few days was amazingly fast.
One afternoon 7 days later, Yi Xing killed a black maned tiger.
After picking up a stalk of blood-accumulating grass, he cultivated in a valley without any ferocious beasts.
Every time he cultivated for a period of time, Yi Xing would look into the distance and scan his surroundings.
7 days had passed, and he was already far away from Greenleaf Village.
He was deep in the Green Cloud Mountain range. At any time, he did not let his guard down. When Yi Xing finished practicing a set of explosive bone fist, his gaze swept around. His expression was slightly stunned. After entering the Green Cloud Mountain range for several days, this was the first time he saw other people. Chapter 10. The intruder did not walk over openly. Instead, he used the trees and rocks as cover to approach Yi Xing. He was already more than 100 meters away from Yi Xing. However, none of this could escape Yi Xing's eyes. The other party also had a strong bow in his hand. Like Yi Xing, he was a hunter in the Azure Cloud Mountain range.
He scanned the bow in the other party's hand.
It was the same as the iron bow in his hand, a 6-spickle strong bow. A 6-spickle strong bow required a strength of 720 kilograms to draw. If it was used frequently, it would require a strength of more than 1,000 kilograms. The intruder's cultivation was at least at the 3rd level of the martial path. The intruder's movements were concealed and sneaky. He obviously did not have good intentions, which made Yi Xing unhappy. Yi Xing pretended to look into the distance, but in fact, he scanned the other party's every move clearly. The hunter secretly approached Yi Xing about 50 meters away and lurked behind a mound full of flowers and plants. Then, he took out a long black arrow with a green arrowhead and aimed at Yi Xing. Although Yi Xing had already expected this, he could not help but be furious at this moment. After all, he was a soul from Earth. That was a society ruled by law. Even if there were murders, it was not something that could see the light of day and was relatively rare. Yi Xing had never experienced the carnage of the world of martial artists, and this hunter was a complete stranger to him. They hadn't even seen each other before, and yet this hunter wanted to kill him in secret. This really made him furious.
Whoosh! At this moment, a cold light burst out from the flowers and plants behind the mound and headed straight for Yi Xing's throat.
This was a hunter with excellent archery skills. His arrow went straight for the throat. Obviously, he was very confident. This arrow taught Yi Xing a harsh lesson. This was the Star Continent, not Earth. There were completely different rules of survival. In the martial arts world, life and death killings were extremely common. They only needed a small reason or even no reason. The speed of this arrow was too fast. In half a blink of an eye, it pierced Yi Xing's throat and killed Yi Xing. Unfortunately, no matter how fast the arrow was, it was not faster than Yi Xing, who was prepared for it. The moment the arrow was shot, Yi Xing had already taken a step to the side. Then, he reached out and grabbed the arrow. The speed of the arrow leaving the bowstring was too fast. Ordinary eyes would not be able to see its trajectory clearly, but Yi Xing's eyes scanned it clearly. Yi Xing reached out and caught it. The arrow shot out by the six-spickle bow was too powerful. Even though Yi Xing's body exploded the moment he grabbed the arrow shaft and used the strength of his bone-explosive fist, he couldn't catch the arrow's forward momentum. Yi Xing took 2 steps back before he was able to catch the arrow. The tip of the arrow was green. It was the same as the arrow Yi Xing used to kill ferocious beasts. It contained saw poison. The hunter behind the mound turned pale. He had been practicing archery for more than 20 years. Within 100 steps, he had never missed. Today, a youth had actually dodged his fatal arrow. If that was all, the hunter would have been surprised, but not so shocked. However, Yi Xing had reached out and grabbed the arrow he had shot out, which made him deeply shocked. How fast and powerful would an arrow from a six-spickle bow be? How could it be caught by someone's hand? Even a true martial artist would never be able to catch an arrow with their bare hands. This person originally wanted to kill this unfamiliar youth. As a veteran hunter who had been in the Azure Cloud Mountain range, he knew that this unfamiliar youth must be like him, searching for medicinal herbs in the Azure Cloud Mountain range. He wanted to obtain the medicinal herbs on him. Even if he didn't have them, obtaining his bow and arrow would be a great gain. But now, it seemed that he had kicked an iron plate. Even a sneak attack with his archery skills, which he was so proud of, couldn't hurt this youth in the slightest. Instead, the arrow he shot was caught by the youth. How could he not be scared out of his wits? After a moment of shock, he rolled on the ground and hid behind a big tree as thick as his waist. Then, under the cover of the tree, he quickly retreated. Yi Xing had a bow and was also a hunter. This person was obviously afraid that Yi Xing would shoot an arrow at him. As a veteran hunter, he knew how to use cover to avoid the attacks of other hunters. Yi Xing took out his iron bow and knocked the arrow he caught. His eyes were in a state of long-range vision. He scanned the surroundings and watched as the other party left through the cover of the trees. Although Yi Xing was still a little unaccustomed to the rules of survival in the Star Continent and couldn't bring himself to take the initiative to kill or steal treasures, this didn't mean that others could bully him. Yi Xing had his own principles in his heart. If this person shot an arrow at him, he would return it with an arrow. It was fair and square. The hunter used the trees as cover and ran for dozens of meters. He hid behind a tree and looked back. Seeing that Yi Xing didn't chase after him and that the distance between them was more than 100 meters, he relaxed. If he retreated under the cover of the trees, his speed would be too slow. It would be easy for the other party to catch up.
Now that he was more than 100 meters away, he was out of the shooting range of the warrior hunter.
The hunter thought that he was safe and no longer used the trees as cover. Instead, he ran wildly. Whoosh! At this moment, Yi Xing drew his bow and shot. The black arrow instantly broke through the air and shot towards the hunter who was running more than 100 meters away.
The hunter heard the sound of the arrow breaking through the air behind him and his heart tightened. He quickly looked back and his eyes were filled with horror. Puff! The black arrow instantly pierced through his throat and shot forward for more than a dozen meters before nailing into a tree.
The hunter's throat was pierced by an arrow and he died instantly.
He fell to the ground and his eyes were filled with horror and disbelief.
He couldn't understand. They were more than 100 meters away and he was running at high speed. Even a warrior hunter might not be able to hit him. However, how did this young man's arrow pierce through his throat? You shot an arrow at me, so I'll return it to you. You can't dodge it. You deserve to die. You can't blame anyone else. Yi Xing said coldly. His expression was calm as usual as he walked towards the hunter's corpse more than 100 meters away. He had never killed anyone on Earth. He had never even fought before. This was his first time taking someone's life. However, he didn't feel nervous, panicked, or guilty.
On the contrary, there was a faint sense of satisfaction in his heart.
Firstly, it was because the other party wanted to take his life.
It was only natural that he would return the favor in the same way.
Secondly, it was the feeling of having the bow and arrow in his hand and controlling his life. It felt great. He felt like he was in the fantasy world. One man and one bow, he killed the boss alone and traveled the world. Everything was under his control. He missed those beautiful memories in the fantasy world. In the star continent, he didn't want to live a sullen life like he did on Earth. He wanted everything to be controlled by himself. He didn't want to be wronged by the oppression of the outside world. He didn't want to be restricted by the rules of the world. He didn't want to be affected by the opinions of others. He wanted to live like he did in the fantasy world. He wanted to live freely and freely. He wouldn't take the initiative to harm others. However, if anyone offended him, the bow and arrow in his hand would give the appropriate answer. Not long after, Yi Xing arrived in front of the hunter's corpse. He found a bag in the hunter's clothes. When he opened it, there were 3 medicinal herbs inside. 2 of them were relatively ordinary. However, one of them was the emperor bloodgrass. It was extremely precious. It wasn't inferior to the first medicinal herb he harvested, the Chinese knotweed. The emperor bloodgrass greatly nourished one's qi and blood. Its medicinal effect was very strong. It was very useful for the cultivation of the evergreen technique and the explosive bone fist. Compared to Yi Xing's harvest in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, these 3 medicinal herbs were very little. However, the other hunters obviously couldn't be compared to Yi Xing, who had a super brain and monstrous eyesight. Other than that, Yi Xing also found some banknotes in the hunter's clothes. There weren't many banknotes, only about 300 taels of silver. For a hunter who lived in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, this amount of banknotes was very little. It wasn't even a fraction of the value of the bow and arrow in his hand. In the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, there were no places where banknotes could be used. It was obvious that the hunter didn't have all the banknotes on him. Yi Xing dug a hole and buried the hunter. He also put away the medicinal herbs. As for the bow and arrow, Yi Xing took out a few unused arrows and placed them in his quiver. The rest were hidden under a pile of dead branches and leaves. He memorized their locations and would take them with him when he left the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. The attack this time was only a small episode in Yi Xing's journey in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. Yi Xing's journey was as usual. Ordinary medicinal herbs were no longer of much use to him. He stored them all away and ate the precious medicinal herbs directly. He continued to cultivate and made rapid progress every day. Another few days passed. Yi Xing's explosive bone fist had reached a crisp sound of 170. Even if it was a perfect explosive bone fist that could refine 206 bones, it could still be considered a large success. If it was a normal explosive bone fist, it would be above perfection. In fact, it far surpassed perfection. After refining 170 bones, the power of the bone explosion fist was extremely terrifying. Even if he had cultivated the ordinary bone explosion fist to perfection, and his martial arts cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd stage, Yi Xing was confident that his strength would not lose to his opponent. Yi Xing's cultivation had also made great progress in the past few days in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. He had already reached the peak of the 2nd level of the martial path. He was not far from the 3rd level of the martial path. On this day, Yi Xing made a major discovery. He found a middle-grade medicinal herb, Scarlet Blood Ganoderma. Middle-grade medicinal herbs were precious items that true martial artists needed. This Scarlet Blood Ganoderma was worth at least tens of thousands of silver. In the 10 days in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, Yi Xing had obtained a lot of medicinal herbs. Among them, there were many precious medicinal herbs that were worth more than 1,000 silver. However, this was the first time he had seen a middle-grade medicinal herb. In the past 2 days, the progress of the perfect explosive bone fist has significantly decreased compared to before. It is obvious that the medicinal effect of the low-grade medicinal herbs is limited for the perfect explosive bone fist at the large success stage. This Scarlet Blood Ganoderma is just right for me to quickly cultivate the perfect explosive bone fist to perfection. Yi Xing looked at the Scarlet Blood Ganoderma from afar and was overjoyed. If he took the Scarlet Blood Ganoderma, not only could he cultivate the explosive bone fist to perfection, Yi Xing's cultivation would also greatly increase. Right now, he was already at the peak of the 2nd level of the martial path. If he continued to increase his cultivation, he would naturally break through to the 3rd level of the martial path. New book, urgently needs your support. Chapter 11. The scarlet blood Ganoderma was very useful to Yi Xing. However, Yi Xing frowned. As a precious mid-grade herb, how could the scarlet blood Ganoderma not have a fierce beast guarding it? Near the scarlet blood Ganoderma, there was a colorful leopard about 3 meters long lying on its stomach. This leopard's head was much bigger than an ordinary leopard. It was even bigger than a tiger's head. However, its body was not as fat and heavy as a tiger's. It was streamlined and made people think of one word: speed. This was a mid-grade fierce beast. Iron-head leopard. The ranks of fierce beasts were divided by martial artists according to their strength. A mid-grade fierce beast was equivalent to a martial artist in the 4th to 6th stage of the martial path. As for the iron-head leopard, its speed and attack power were top-notch. Even among the mid-level fierce beasts, it was famous for its ferocity. Even if a martial artist in the 4th stage of the martial path encountered it, they would die without a doubt. To hunt or not to hunt? Yi Xing's mind was filled with two thoughts. He wanted to hunt the iron-head leopard, but the risk was too high, making him hesitate. Although my cultivation has reached the peak of the 2nd stage of the martial path, it is still a bit difficult to take that step into the 3rd stage of the martial path. It will take some time. The perfect explosive bone fist has been cultivated to the large success stage. The low-grade herbs will not be able to support the later stages of cultivation. If there are no mid-grade herbs, it will take much longer to cultivate to the great perfection stage than to step into the 3rd stage of the martial path. If I can obtain this scarlet blood Ganoderma, whether it is stepping into the 3rd stage of the martial path or cultivating the perfect explosive bone fist to the great perfection stage, it will be easy. When the conditions are right, success will come naturally. It will save a lot of time. After thinking about it, Yi Xing's idea of hunting the iron-head leopard took the upper hand. After all, the scarlet blood Ganoderma was too big for him. Moreover, he was very confident in his archery skills. In a head-on battle, Yi Xing would not be the iron-head leopard's opponent. However, he had a bow and arrow in his hands, so there was a chance of killing it. Bows and arrows were different from ordinary weapons. With a bow in hand, one could kill a target that was several times stronger than oneself, or even 10 times stronger than oneself. The key was in one's use of the bow and arrow. There is still half a month before the main house's emissary arrives at Greenleaf Village. At that time, the Ye family will hold a clan meeting. I must step into the 3rd stage of the martial path as soon as possible. Only then will I have a chance to defeat Yi Xing and be chosen by the main house's emissary to go to Azure Sky City. I will experience stronger martial artists and learn higher-level martial arts. If I miss this opportunity, I will have to wait for another year in Greenleaf Village. Therefore I must not miss it. Yi Xing's eyes were filled with determination. He had already made his decision. His goal was to become a martial saint, a peerless expert. Therefore, he had to explore the wider world and learn higher-level martial arts. The younger one was, the more precious time was. He didn't want to miss this opportunity and wait another year in Qingye Village. He held the iron bow in his hand. With the bow in hand, he was filled with confidence. He felt like he was in a fantasy world, holding a longbow and fighting a boss alone. Now, in his eyes, the iron-head leopard was a boss. And now, he wanted to display his hunter's nature. With the bow in his hand, he would hunt the iron-head leopard alone. An hour later, Yi Xing arrived at the valley where the iron-head leopard and the scarlet blood Lingji were. There weren't many trees in this valley, so the field of vision was relatively wide. Yi Xing crawled forward on the ground, approaching the iron-head leopard. The wind kept blowing. Yi Xing's direction was downwind of the iron-head leopard. The iron-head leopard lying on the ground faintly smelled a strange odor. It sniffed twice with its nose and then disappeared. It didn't pay it any attention. Yi Xing continued to approach. Suddenly, the iron-head leopard on the ground moved. Its upper body stood up and its eyes swept in all directions. Its ears perked up to listen. At this time, Yi Xing was still 150 to 60 meters away from the iron-head leopard. Obviously, the iron-head leopard's sensitivity was much higher than that of low-level ferocious beasts. When Yi Xing hunted low-level ferocious beasts, he had successfully lurked about 100 meters away before the target was alerted. The range of the iron bow was far beyond 150 to 60 meters. However, to accurately shoot the vital points of the iron-head leopard from 150 to 60 meters away was an extremely difficult task. Not only did this require a strong arm to ensure that the arrow would not deviate within 150 to 60 meters, but it also required accurate eyesight to lock on to the target. Even a martial warrior would find it difficult to achieve this. This distance was almost the limit of Yi Xing's shooting range. It was easy for accidents to happen. He decided to continue lurking and wait for the iron-head leopard's alertness to lower before shooting at it when he got closer. This way, the possibility of accidents would be minimized. However, things didn't develop according to Yi Xing's expectations. After the iron-head leopard stood up and scanned the area for a while, it didn't continue to lie down. Instead, it stood up and stretched. Then, it started to walk, as if it was patrolling its territory. Yi Xing cursed inwardly. This way, the iron-head leopard would definitely discover his presence. Seeing the iron-head leopard walking in his direction, Yi Xing didn't hesitate. He already had an azurite arrow knocked on the bow, pulled it to a full moon, and aimed at the iron-head leopard's eyes. Whoosh! The azurite arrow shot out from the bowstring with a sharp sound, heading straight for the iron-head leopard's right eye. The iron-head leopard was very fast. Yi Xing had to attack from a distance. Otherwise, if the distance was too close, the iron-head leopard would rush up to him in a few breaths. The iron-head leopard's head was like steel. Only its eyes and ears were its weak points. At this moment, Yi Xing was right in front of the iron-head leopard. The only weak point he could shoot was the iron-head leopard's eyes. However, the iron-head leopard was in a vigilant state, so it wasn't easy to kill it. The iron-head leopard's reaction was very fast. The loud sound of the arrow piercing through the air made its ears twitch, and its head immediately tilted to the side. Ding! The azurite arrow hit the iron-head leopard's head. The sound of metal hitting metal rang out, and the azurite arrow carried a piece of flesh with it as it ricocheted to the side. Although the iron-head leopard's head was bleeding, it didn't even hurt its bones. It was just a superficial wound. The iron-head leopard let out a loud roar when it was attacked. It bent its body and leaped up. With a whoosh, it rushed towards Yi Xing's direction as fast as the wind. Yi Xing had already stood up, but he didn't turn around to run. Although he wasn't slow, he couldn't compare to the iron-head leopard's speed. If he turned around and ran now, the iron-head leopard would catch up to him in a few breaths. Then, he would die without a complete corpse. Even if he had a super brain, he wouldn't be able to escape from the iron-head leopard. The more tense the situation was, the clearer Yi Xing's mind was. He didn't panic at all. Apart from the fact that Yi Xing's brain was a super brain, his experience in the fantasy world was also a major factor. Only by being calm and not panicking could he fight a boss alone. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xing took out another azure gold arrow and knocked it on the bow. Yi Xing's eyes were fixed on the iron-head leopard that was rushing toward him. He ignored everything in front of him. Only the iron-head leopard's body was scanned by his super brain. The iron-head leopard was magnified several times in the super brain scan. Its blood flow, the movement of its bones, the changes in its muscles, the transmission of power, the trajectory of its movements. Every single movement was quickly analyzed by the super brain. Whoosh! Only 2 breaths later, Yi Xing shot again. The second azure gold arrow was shot out with a sharp sound of breaking through the air. In an instant, the azurite arrow accurately hit the iron-head leopard's right knee joint. It was the moment the iron-head leopard's right leg jumped up from the ground. It had just used up all its strength, so its muscles were the most relaxed. It was also the moment when the 2 bones were the most separated. If it wasn't for the super brain scan, it would be impossible to capture this moment. The azurite arrow accurately hit the space between the 2 bones. It forcefully broke through some of the soft bones and stabbed into the joint. The iron-head leopard's right knee joint was suddenly hit by the arrow, so it lost its balance. It was moving forward too quickly, so it instantly fell to the ground. It rolled a few times, and a ditch was formed in the grass. Yi Xing seized the chance. After he fired the arrow, he immediately turned around and ran. At the same time, he took out the 3rd arrow and knocked it on his iron body bow. After running for more than 20 meters, Yi Xing immediately turned around. At that moment, the iron-head leopard that was rolling on the ground had just stabilized its body. It bit off the azurite arrow that was stuck in its right knee joint. It endured the pain in its leg and continued to charge at Yi Xing with a roar. Even though the arrowhead was stuck in its joints, the iron-headed leopard's speed did not slow down much. It was only a few dozen meters away from Yi Xing.
If Yi Xing had not turned around and ran for more than 20 meters when he pulled out the arrow, the iron-headed leopard would have already rushed in front of him.
But now, Yi Xing had more than 20 meters of space, so he fired the third arrow.
Whoosh! The sharp sound of the arrow piercing through the air was very ear-piercing.
The iron-head leopard was hit again. The azurite arrow hit the iron-head leopard's left knee joint. Although Yi Xing wasn't nervous or panicked, it didn't mean that he didn't pay attention to it. He was highly focused. Every arrow he shot, he used his greatest strength. The power of the arrows was extremely terrifying. The iron-head leopard fell to the ground again. With the experience of being hit by an arrow last time, this time the iron-head leopard only rolled and stabilized its body. It continued to charge at Yi Xing. Both of its knee joints were hit. Even though the iron-head leopard's body was strong and its bones were like steel, it still staggered and couldn't maintain its balance. This time, Yi Xing didn't run. Instead, he stood in the same place. He quickly took out the fourth azurite arrow and knocked it on the bow. At this moment, the iron-head leopard noticed that its two front legs were not listening to its commands. It let out a loud roar and kicked its two strong hind legs. Its body directly jumped up and pounced on Yi Xing. This pounce was more than 20 meters away. If Yi Xing had turned and ran when he pulled out the arrow, he might have been hit by the iron-head leopard's pounce. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Unfortunately, Yi Xing, who had a super brain, could see the iron-head leopard's power flow clearly. He had already predicted that the iron-head leopard would pounce on him. So, he knocked the arrow and pulled the bow. Just as the iron-head leopard opened its mouth and pounced, the azurite arrow instantly left the bowstring and shot into the iron-head leopard's mouth. The iron-head leopard cried out and fell in front of Yi Xing. Chapter 12. The moment the iron-headed leopard landed on the ground, Yi Xing immediately jumped to the side. Sure enough, the iron-headed leopard's vitality was strong. Even though it was fatally injured, it still struggled and pounced at Yi Xing. If Yi Xing hadn't dodged quickly, he would have been dragged down by the iron-headed leopard. After the last attack, the iron-headed leopard's body twitched. It was obvious that it had reached the end of its life. Yi Xing also let out a big sigh of relief. Although the iron-head leopard didn't even touch the corner of his clothes during the battle, Yi Xing still felt exhausted, as if he had just fought a great battle. Yi Xing took a deep breath and adjusted his breathing. Looking at the corpse of the iron-headed leopard, his face couldn't help but reveal an excited smile. This iron-headed leopard's strength was enough to kill a martial artist of the fourth stage of the martial path. Compared to a martial disciple of the second stage of the martial path, this was an extremely strong existence. However, such an existence had died under his bow and arrow. This was indeed something to be proud of. After confirming that the iron-headed leopard was dead, Yi Xing walked towards the scarlet blood Ganoderma. Before Yi Xing could reach the scarlet blood Ganoderma, 5 people suddenly appeared at the peak of the mountain in front of him. Yi Xing didn't let down his guard just because he had killed the iron-headed leopard. He constantly paid attention to his surroundings. The moment the 5 people appeared, Yi Xing noticed them. This made Yi Xing's relaxed state of mind tense up in an instant. There was an indescribable irritation in his heart. The scarlet blood Ganoderma wasn't in his hands yet, and now a group of 5 people had appeared. This wasn't a good thing. Before killing the iron-headed leopard, Yi Xing observed his surroundings and didn't discover anyone else. However, although Yi Xing's eyesight was strong, he couldn't see everything. The range of his X-ray vision was limited, and he couldn't see through a mountain peak. Therefore, he didn't discover the 5 people behind the mountain peak. When he killed the iron-headed leopard, the 5 people were attracted by the roar of the iron-headed leopard. Yi Xing scanned the 5 people into his superbrain, and Yi Xing was shocked. These 5 people were not ordinary. The ones on the left and right were armed with bows and arrows. They were obviously hunters, and all of them were at the 3rd stage of the martial path. As for the other 3, they were all true martial artists in the 4th stage of the martial path. The one standing in the middle was even in the late 4th stage of the martial path. They were all about 15 or 16 years old, about the same age as him. Obviously, they were from a martial arts family. Especially the 4th stage martial artist, who was the youngest. Yi Xing scanned his age and found that he was less than 15 years old.
Yi Qing was the only one in the younger generation of the Ye family who was at the 4th level of the martial path. At this age, he was still at the 3rd level of the martial path. It could be seen that this person was either a genius or came from a martial arts family. He was much stronger than the Ye family in Qingye village. Yi Xing stopped and did not continue to approach the scarlet blood Ganoderma. From their position, they might not be able to see the scarlet blood Ganoderma, but if Yi Xing approached, they would definitely see it. Friends, I am here to hunt the iron-headed leopard. I am sorry to disturb you. Yi Xing cupped his fists and smiled at the 5 people on the mountain. He pointed out that he killed the iron-headed leopard and explained his strength. Then he said it politely. He believed that the other party would be afraid of his strength and leave directly. As long as the 5 people left, he would pick the scarlet blood Ganoderma and leave immediately.
The corpse of the iron-headed leopard was not far away and there was no one else here.
It could be seen that Yi Xing was telling the truth. This made the 5 people a little moved. To be able to kill the iron-headed leopard, it was extraordinary. At least, even if the 5 of them joined hands, they would not dare to make a move on the iron-headed leopard. Among the 5 people, the one in the middle, who was at the late 4th stage of the martial path and was the youngest, secretly made a killing gesture to the other 4 people. Then he smiled at Yi Xing and said, "Friend, your archery skills are amazing. The iron-headed leopard is not something that an ordinary person can kill. It is really admirable. May I know your name and where are you from?" While speaking, the person had already walked down the mountain and the other 4 people immediately followed. Yi Xing's heart turned cold. The other party's secret hand signal was clearly scanned. It was one thing for the veteran hunter in the Green Cloud Mountain range to want to kill him, but these 5 people were obviously only in their teens, and yet they were so vicious. This made Yi Xing's heart turn cold. The Star Continent was indeed different from Earth's lawful society. Since he knew the other party's intention, Yi Xing knew that he could not keep the scarlet blood Ganoderma. As long as they were not blind, it was impossible not to find the scarlet blood Ganoderma when the 5 people went down the mountain. The only plan now was to pick the scarlet blood Ganoderma and escape. Although Yi Xing's heart was cold, he still had a smile on his face. He walked towards the scarlet blood Ganoderma and said, "I am Luo Zhen, from Pingyang County. May I know where you are from?" Yi Xing of course would not tell them his real name. He had once read a Xianxia novel on Earth. The main character was Luo Zhen, from Pingyang County, so he could use it as a lie. Pingyang County? Zishan County was subordinate to the various big cities and each city was subordinate to the various small towns. There was no county system. When the 4th stage of the martial path youth heard this, he was stunned. But then he smiled. Why bother about a dead person's background? They already knew that there was a scarlet blood Ganoderma here and planned to pick it after killing the iron-headed leopard. However, after some consideration, they still didn't attack the iron-head leopard in the end. The reason was that the iron-head leopard was too fast. If they couldn't kill it, then they would be killed by it and it would be difficult to escape. But now that the iron-headed leopard was dead, in their eyes, Yi Xing was much easier to deal with than the iron-headed leopard. Even though Yi Xing's archery skills were outstanding, there were 5 of them. 2 of them were hunters of the 3rd stage of the martial path and 3 of them were true martial artists. In their eyes, once they got close, no matter how good Yi Xing's archery skills were, he would still die. Remember, I am Xiong Chitsai, from Tiansong City. HM? The 4th stage of the martial path youth was talking and laughing. But when he saw Yi Xing approaching the scarlet blood Ganoderma and suddenly making a move to pick it, his face changed. He saw through Yi Xing's plan and waved his hand. So the 2 hunters on the left and right drew their bows at the same time. 2 arrows shot out towards Yi Xing. Hateful, the 2 arrows' trajectories were scanned by Yi Xing's superbrain. The result was that he could only dodge. If he continued to pick the scarlet blood Ganoderma, no matter how he dodged, he would at least be hit by one of the arrows. The 5 of them wanted to kill him. If he was hit by the arrows, he would die without a doubt. It would be difficult for him to escape. There was no need to think. Yi Xing made a decision in his heart. His body rolled to the side and dodged the 2 arrows. In the next moment, Yi Xing got up and took out 2 azure gold arrows and knocked them on his iron body bow. Whoosh whoosh, 2 arrows shot out from the bow and went straight for the 2 hunters' throats. Moreover, after Yi Xing shot the arrows, he didn't stop at all. He used his speed to the limit and turned to run. Even if it was a hasty shot,
Yi Xing's 2 arrows were incomparably accurate. The main thing was that the distance between them was only 50 to 60 meters. Within this distance, Yi Xing's arrows were naturally accurate. The 2 hunters instinctively dodged, but Yi Xing's 2 fourth-stage martial artists, one on the left and one on the right, both of them slashed out at the same time. Both of them slashed out at the same time and knocked away Yi Xing's arrows. At the same time, Xiong Qicai's body leaped up like a wild goose flying into the sky. His body landed on the ground, and surprisingly, he only touched the grass for a moment, and then he leaped several feet forward. It was obvious that he had used the lightness skill. Yi Xing was able to kill the iron-head leopard. Xiong Qicai was also very afraid of Yi Xing's archery skills. If he stole Yi Xing's scarlet blood Ganoderma, Yi Xing would hold a grudge. A hunter with such excellent archery skills would take revenge in the Azure Cloud Mountain range. Even a 5th-stage martial artist would find it difficult to be at ease. Because of this, when Xiong Qicai saw Yi Xing, he made the decision to kill Yi Xing to prevent future troubles. Now that Yi Xing wanted to escape, Xiong Qicai naturally couldn't let Yi Xing escape. Otherwise they would be in trouble. In the Azure Cloud Mountain range, there were very few places like this valley where trees were sparse and vision was wide. Most of the places were deep in the mountains and dense forests. In this kind of place, a hunter with excellent archery skills would be too terrifying. Xiong Qicai, who used his movement skill, was like a falcon. He was not much slower than the iron-head leopard. He quickly chased after Yi Xing. Yi Xing turned his head and glanced at Xiong Qicai. Xiong Qicai's figure was instantly swept into the superbrain. His running speed did not decrease at all. He flipped in the air and shot an arrow towards Xiong Qicai's heart. Xiong Qicai was startled. At such a critical moment, Yi Xing was still able to fight back while running away? Yi Xing's archery skills were even more terrifying than he had imagined. More importantly, the arrow came at the right time. It was so fast that Xiong Qicai had no time to dodge. Clang! Xiong Qicai used his saber to block in front of his chest. Only then did he block the arrow that should have shot into his heart. The terrifying power of the arrow made his running speed stop. His body that had just jumped up fell down again. The distance between him and Yi Xing quickly increased. So originally, Yi Xing only needed to shoot one more arrow to make Xiong Qicai feel more threatened. He might even be injured by his second arrow. But at this time, 2 more arrows were shot towards him. Yi Xing had to stop the second arrow and dodge the 2 arrows. At this time, Yi Xing was already 100 meters away from the 2 hunters. The 2 hunters frowned. This was beyond their accurate shooting range. They could only put away their bows and chase down the mountain. At the same time, the 2 fourth-stage martial path martial artists also used Qinggong and chased after Yi Xing. If there was only 1 or 2 of them, Yi Xing would like to fight with them with his archery skills. He had a lot of confidence that even if he was facing a 4th-stage martial path martial artist, he would be able to use his archery skills to make them unable to get close to him. It was just like hunting an iron-head leopard. However, there were 5 of them. Yi Xing didn't want to continue fighting. If he was surrounded, his life would be in danger. He was a hunter. As long as he could get away, this Green Cloud Mountain range would be his home ground. Yi Xing shot back 1 or 2 arrows from time to time, stopping the 3 martial artists who were using Qinggong to get close. Very quickly, he climbed up a small hill on the other side of the valley. Behind the hill, there was a cliff that was tens of meters high. Below the cliff, there was a river. Yi Xing jumped down without hesitation. I will be back. When Xiong Qicai and the others chased to the side of the cliff, Yi Xing had already disappeared. Only his voice echoed. My new book is in urgent need of your recommendation ticket support. After 12 o'clock at night, the new book list will be updated. Chapter 13. The cliff was steep. The river below was only a few feet wide. The water was turbulent and there were many reefs in the river. From the top of the cliff, it was impossible to find a place to land. Even if one jumped directly into the river, they would probably fall to their deaths on the reefs in the river. The 3 martial artists in the 4th stage of the martial path were the first to arrive. When they looked down, they sucked in a breath of cold air and didn't dare to jump down. Young Master Qi, the river is full of reefs. If that kid jumped down from here,
He must have died and his body must have been washed away by the river. The oldest martial artist in the 4th stage of the martial path looked down at the river and didn't see Yi Xing's figure. Unless he's a martial arts master who can release his internal strength, there's no way he'll survive if he falls from here. Another martial artist in the 4th stage of the martial path came to this conclusion after observing for a while. Dead without a body? He must have been washed away by the river.
At this time, the 2 hunters in the 3rd stage of the martial path also arrived at the edge of the cliff. They looked down and said, the height of the cliff was 60 to 70 meters. Even a martial artist in the 6th stage of the martial path would die without a complete corpse. Although there was a small river below, the river was narrow and the water was turbulent. Moreover, there were reefs everywhere. There was no safe place to land. However, there was no safe place to stay. Yi Xing was an exception to this rule. Yi Xing scanned the area with his superbrain.
He could see where the water was urgent, where the water was deep, and where the reefs were hidden.
In Yi Xing's eyes, there were quite a few safe places to land in this small river. Just a few dozen meters below him, there were 2 safe spots for him to land in. With the superbrain's calculations, Yi Xing accurately jumped into the nearest safe landing spot and fell into the river. He was not injured at all. Then, Yi Xing dived into the river behind a huge reef and came out of the water. The reef blocked the view of the 5 people on the cliff so they couldn't see him. Yi Xing, on the other hand, scanned the 5 people on the cliff with his superbrain. He could see their every move and the circulation of their qi and blood. Yi Xing could see them clearly. Looks like this brat is really dead. This scarlet blood Lingji belongs to this young master. Xiong Qicai didn't say a word.
He observed for the longest time and finally came to a conclusion.
The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a faint smile. After saying this, Xiong Qi turned around and left. The other 4 also turned around. Whoosh!
Right at this moment, an azure gold arrow shot over, and it carried a sharp sound as it tore through the air.
At this moment, the 5 of them were at their most relaxed state.
By the time they heard the sound of the arrow breaking through the air, it was already too late.
The oldest martial artist in the 4th stage of the martial path let out a blood-curdling scream as the azure gold arrow pierced through his back and exited his chest, piercing through his heart. This arrow was extremely powerful. After it pierced through the heart of the oldest martial artist, it continued to fly upwards, aiming at Xiong Qicai's throat. This arrow was not only timed perfectly, but the angle could also be said to be perfect. The arrow was shot directly at the vital points of the 2 martial artists. After all, the arrow was blocked by the first martial artist's body. Xiong Qicai's reaction was very fast.
At the critical moment, his body leaned to the side and the azure gold arrow that should have pierced through his throat shot into his shoulder.
2 blood-curdling screams sounded almost at the same time.
The oldest martial artist in the 4th stage of the martial path fell to the ground.
He was shot through the heart and killed instantly. Xiong Qicai, after being shot, took advantage of the momentum and fell to the ground. The other 3 people were all shocked. They all rolled on the ground and moved away from the cliff. Below the cliff, Yi Xing, who was standing in the river, slowly put down his bow and arrow. His opponents were blocked by the mountain and he was below the cliff. As long as they weren't stupid enough to appear at the edge of the cliff, he wouldn't be able to attack them.
Young Master Qi.
The 3 people who had rolled away from the cliff were all shocked when they saw Xiong Qicai fall to the ground. They crawled and rolled to the side of Xiong Qicai.
Damn bastard!
Xiong Qicai's face was distorted.
His eyes shot out a terrifying gaze. He crawled up and said, "How is Xiong Yiming?" There was no need for the other 3 to answer.
Xiong Qicai, who had crawled up, turned around and saw Xiong Yiming lying in a pool of blood. He had already died.
Damned bastard! I'm going to tear him into pieces.
Xiong Qicai punched the ground and said angrily, "Stinking brat! Do you know the Xiong family of Tiansong City? You dared to shoot a disciple of the Xiong family, and even injured young Master Qi. Just wait and receive your death. Even if we search the entire Tiansong City, the Xiong family will find you. We will catch you and your family in one fell swoop and let you die without a burial place." A hunter of the 3rd stage of the martial path shouted at the bottom of the cliff. Of course, Yi Xing knew the Xiong family of Tiansong City. The Ye family was one of the top forces in Tiansong City. However, it was still not comparable to the Xiong family.
The Xiong family in Tiansong City was like the Ye family in Qingye village, the #1 martial arts family. Just like the Ye family, there were many branches of the Xiong family in Tiansong City. In fact, there were even more branches than the Ye family. If Yi Xing was a native of the Star Continent, he who came from a Ye family in Qingye village might really be afraid of the Xiong family of Tiansong City. However, to Yi Xing who had lived on Earth, he did not have this kind of fear towards powerful forces. His voice came from the bottom of the cliff. Xiong family of Tiansong City, I have heard of Black Bear, that Black Bear, I am so scared. But I am afraid that you will not be able to return to Tiansong City alive. If you die in the Azure Cloud Mountains, will the Xiong family know? By the time the Xiong family finds the Azure Cloud Mountains, your corpses would have been stuffed into the teeth of the beasts, hee. Whatever you give me, I will give you in return. This was Yi Xing's principle. These 5 people wanted to kill him, forcing him to jump off the cliff to escape. Then, Yi Xing would only repay them with one word, and that was kill. In the Azure Cloud Mountains, once the distance was increased, it would be his home ground. If he wanted to attack, he would attack. If he wanted to retreat, he would retreat. Everything was under his control. At this moment, the other 4th stage martial artist had already pulled out the arrow from Xiong Chitsai's body and applied some medicinal powder on the wound. The bleeding stopped immediately and the blackened area stopped spreading. The poison in the body was also controlled by the medicinal powder. 4th stage martial artists already had inner strength in their bodies. Normal poison would not be able to kill them. The injury from this arrow was not considered serious to Xiong Chitsai. However, Yi Xing's words made Xiong Chitsai and the other 3 look very ugly. From the way Yi Xing escaped, he didn't even know Qinggong. It was obvious that he was a martial disciple with no internal strength. At most, he was only at the 3rd stage of the martial path. On their side, there were 2 people at the peak of the 3rd stage of the martial path and 3 real martial artists at the 4th stage of the martial path. However, Yi Xing had become the hunter and the 5 of them had become the prey. One was dead and one was injured. The Xiong family of Tiansong City was the #1 martial arts family in Tiansong City. When the disciples of the Xiong family went out, who would not be respectful and avoid them? In the end, they were treated as prey. Moreover, they were directly told that they would all be hunted down. When they heard this, how could they not be angry? Their identity as disciples of the Xiong family did not give them any protection. They had lived for more than 10 years and this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. Especially Xiong Chitsai. His father was a martial arts master of the 7th stage of the martial path. In the Xiong family, he was on the same level as the head of the family. His status was not ordinary. Since he was young, he was like the moon surrounded by stars. Today, he suffered such a setback. However, the situation was more powerful than the person. The opponent's archery was too terrifying. He did not know how he survived after jumping off the cliff. In this Azure Cloud Mountain range, even if there were 2 3rd-stage martial artists and a true martial artist, it would be difficult to compete with the opponent. Even if Xiong Chitsai wanted to kill the opponent, he had to retreat. He gritted his teeth and said, "Bury Xiong Yiming and collect the scarlet blood Ganoderma. We will immediately leave here and return to Tiansong City. Pay attention to cleaning up the traces. Don't let that brat track us." Soon, Xiong Yiming's body was buried and the scarlet blood Ganoderma was dug out by Xiong Chitsai. The 4 of them immediately left the place. The 2 hunters were responsible for covering the rear. They cleaned up the traces of their departure and set up a fake image of them leaving in the opposite direction. An hour later, Yi Xing returned to the valley. Even if it was a senior hunter, it would be difficult to find the 4 of them here. They might even be deceived by the 2 hunters. However, Yi Xing's eyes were more than 10 times stronger than a senior hunter's. Even the tiniest traces could be scanned by his eyes. He found the real traces of the 4 of them leaving this place and followed them all the way. In the Azure Cloud Mountain range, being tracked by a hunter was terrifying. Especially when it was a hunter with superb archery. It was even more terrifying. Therefore, after Xiong Chitsai and the others had left the valley, they had been rapidly running. They were quite familiar with the surrounding terrain, so they avoided some powerful fierce beasts. Ordinary fierce beasts didn't dare to provoke them, so their speed was very fast.
Yi Xing walked in the Azure Cloud Mountain Range for more than 10 days. He thought that he was very far into the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, but in reality, this was not the case. This place was still the outer area of the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. It was just that it was very far from Azure Leaf Village and closer to Tiansong City. Xiong Chitsai's group of 4 had been rushing in the mountain range for an entire day. In the evening, they had already reached the edge of the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. When they had completely left the range of the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, it was already night time. A crescent moon climbed up into the sky. The sky was filled with twinkling stars, but there was not much light. The earth was dusky. After leaving the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, there was still a large area of ordinary mountain range. It would take at least 2 to 4 hours to walk out of the mountain range. After walking out of the mountain range, it would still take a long time to return to Tiansong City. After leaving the Azure Cloud Mountain Range, the 4 of them stopped. Young Master Qi, we have cleaned up the traces of leaving the valley. That kid shouldn't be able to follow us. Moreover, with our speed today, we have already left the Azure Cloud Mountain Range. No matter how experienced that kid is, he won't be able to catch up to us. A Martial Dao 3rd Stage Hunter said. Xiong Chitsai looked at the Azure Cloud Mountain Range behind him. It was pitch black in the night. He nodded and said, "All right, we will rest here for the night. Tomorrow morning." Whoosh, an arrow shot out from the darkness and instantly pierced through Xiong Chitsai's throat. On Monday, new book will enter the rankings. Please support me with your recommendation tickets. Chapter 14. It was a black arrow.
There was no light in the dark night. Only the sharp sound of the arrow breaking through the air was very prominent in the quiet night.
However, when Yi Xing shot the arrow, Xiong Chitsai was talking and was completely unprepared. When he heard the sound of the arrow breaking through the air, it was already too late. Xiong Chitsai was not even 15 years old and his cultivation had already reached the late 4th stage of the martial path. This kind of cultivation, even in Tiansong City, would be considered a genius. Moreover, Xiong Chitsai's identity was not small. His father was a master of the 7th stage of the martial path.
In the Xiong family, he was on the same level as the head of the family.
However, under Yi Xing's arrow, there was no difference between high and low status. Once the arrow pierced through the throat, it didn't matter if you were a martial disciple or martial artist, there was only one result, and that was instant death. Xiong Chitsai couldn't say anything else. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he fell to the ground with hatred. Young Master Qi. The moment Xiong Chitsai was shot, the other 3 heard the sound of the arrow breaking through the air and instinctively dodged. At this moment, although the light was dim, they were not far from each other. They all saw the scene of Xiong Chitsai's throat being pierced. Whoosh whoosh, 2 hunters of the 3rd stage of the martial path heard the sound and after dodging, they simultaneously drew their bows and shot an arrow in the direction of Yi Xing. After Yi Xing shot the first arrow, he had already changed his position, and the 2 arrows missed their target. At the same time, a sharp sound broke through the air. Another black arrow broke through the air and came straight for the throat of one of the hunters. At this moment in the battle, the 2 hunters of the 3rd stage of the martial path were also very vigilant. After shooting the arrow, they immediately rolled to the side. The arrow that should have pierced through the hunter's throat flew past his head. In the next moment, a mournful scream and the sound of a nail rang out at the same time. The hunter who rolled to the side directly fell to the ground and didn't get up again. Just now, Yi Xing didn't just shoot 1 arrow, but 2 arrows in a row.
He calculated the direction in which the hunter would dodge, so when the hunter rolled on the ground, he was shot in the heart by the 2nd arrow and died.
The arrow that brushed past the hunter's scalp didn't miss. Instead, it continued to fly a dozen meters forward, aiming for the throat of the remaining 4th stage martial artist. Everything was going according to Yi Xing's calculations. The arrow wouldn't hit the hunter. The 4th stage martial artist further away was Yi Xing's real target. Not only did he shoot 2 arrows with 1 bow, he also wanted to kill 2 people at the same time.
Unfortunately, a martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path was far stronger than a martial disciple.
At this moment, he was on high alert, so how could he be easily killed by Yi Xing's arrow? At the critical moment, the black arrow was struck by the 4th stage martial path cultivator's saber.
The arrow was deflected to the side and disappeared into the darkness. Although this fourth-level martial artist blocked Yixing's arrow, he was still shocked and sweating profusely. In the darkness, he couldn't see far and didn't know where the next arrow would come from. How could he dare to stay? He immediately used his movement technique and quickly fled. When this person fled, the remaining third-stage martial artist was scared out of his wits. How could he face Yixing alone? How could he be a match for Yixing? He didn't have the courage to fight Yixing alone, so he turned around and fled. Whoosh, an arrow pierced through the air, and in the blink of an eye, the hunter turned around and fled, hastening his death. Soon, Yixing walked out of the darkness and arrived in front of Xiong Chitsai's body. Looking at the direction the fourth-stage martial artist disappeared in, he sighed. He had already used up a lot of arrows in the 10 days he was in the Azure Cloud Mountain range. When he fought with the 5 people in the valley, he used up a lot more arrows. When he jumped off the cliff, he only had 5 arrows left. He used one to kill Xiong Yiming, and now he used 4 more. His quiver was empty. If he had 2 more arrows, the fourth-stage martial artist might not have been able to escape his death. Now that he was out of the Azure Cloud Mountain range, the martial artist used his movement technique to escape. Yixing couldn't catch up, so he gave up the chase. After searching Xiong Chitsai's body, Yixing quickly found the scarlet blood spirit mushroom and several other valuable herbs. Moreover, there were a lot of banknotes, more than 10,000 taels. It can be seen that he was much richer than the senior hunter. Even in the Azure Cloud Mountain range, he still had so much banknotes on him. In addition, Xiong Chitsai's long saber was also a very precious treasure. It was a middle-grade weapon and was very rare in Azure Leaf Village. Its value was no less than the scarlet blood spirit mushroom, worth at least 10,000 taels of silver. The scarlet blood spirit mushroom was enough for Yixing's cultivation to reach the 3rd stage of the martial path. As long as he broke through, Yixing planned to return to Azure Leaf Village. Therefore, whether it was Xiong Chitsai's long saber or the other 2 hunters' bows, Yixing didn't let go of them. He tied them together and carried them into the Azure Cloud Mountain range. At night, the vicious beast's activities were much more frequent than during the day. The Azure Cloud Mountain range was even more dangerous. Under normal circumstances, Yixing would dig a small cave in the mountain at night and hide to rest. However, Yixing didn't plan to do so tonight. After all, a martial artist escaped. If that martial artist escaped back to the Azure Sky City's Xiong family, the Xiong family's big shots might come out to kill him. He couldn't stay in this area. He had to go far away and go deep into the Azure Cloud Mountain range. In the Azure Cloud Mountain range, Yixing was like a dragon returning to the sea. Even if it was a 7th-stage martial path grandmaster, it would be difficult to kill him. Even though the Azure Cloud Mountain range was dangerous at night, Yixing was still in the outer area. Moreover, his vision was only affected by his long-range vision but not his scanning. Therefore, he was able to detect the strong vicious beasts in advance. Along the way, he was scared but not in danger. When the sun rose, Yixing had already returned to the valley where the scarlet blood spirit mushroom was. He then went to the cliff he jumped from before and jumped down again, jumping into the river below. Then, Yixing followed the river and went far away from this place. In this way, even if the Xiong family's tracking technique was brilliant, even if they used hunting dogs to track, they wouldn't be able to find Yixing. When night came, Yixing had already followed the river for a long distance. Then, he found a natural cave in a nearby mountain peak that didn't have any demonic beasts. He sealed the cave entrance with a huge rock and rested inside. Last night he didn't sleep and today he was on the move. Yixing was already tired. He slept for a while and when he woke up, it was already dawn. Yixing left the cave and climbed to the top of the mountain. He surveyed a 10-mile radius and didn't find anyone from the Xiong family following him. After confirming the location, Yixing crossed the mountains and returned to the place where he killed the veteran hunter. He took out the bow and arrows he hid and headed towards Azure Leaf Village. Like this, he traveled for another day. At night, Yixing found a small cave where he spent the night before. He sealed the cave entrance with a huge rock and spent the night here. In the cave, Yixing took out the scarlet blood spirit mushroom. After obtaining the scarlet blood spirit mushroom, he was either rushing on the road or too tired so he didn't have a chance to consume it. Now he finally had a chance. Yixing first cultivated the evergreen technique for a while.
The power of the stars circulated through his 5 meridians. He cultivated wholeheartedly without any distracting thoughts. At this time, Yi Xing ate the scarlet blood spirit mushroom and continued to circulate the evergreen technique to slowly refine it.
The medicinal villages on the star continent were much more effective than those on Earth.
They also absorbed the power of the stars to grow. Not only could it strengthen the body, it was also very beneficial to the cultivation of martial artists. Soon, the medicinal power of the scarlet blood spirit mushroom was slowly extracted by Yi Xing using the evergreen technique. It turned into a vigorous blood energy that nourished his flesh and bones. At the same time, the power of the stars contained within the scarlet blood spirit mushroom was also absorbed by Yi Xing. The second star ring in his dantian became more and more resplendent. As time passed, more and more of the medicinal power of the scarlet blood spirit mushroom was extracted. The vigorous blood energy became more and more surging. Yi Xing felt as if his whole body was full. The circulation of the evergreen technique was pushed to the limit by Yi Xing. He desperately absorbed the surging vigorous blood energy. Even so, he still felt as if his body was bloated and had no way to vent it. Slow. Absorbing with only 5 meridians is too slow. At this time, Yi Xing deeply understood the importance of a powerful cultivation technique. His evergreen technique had been improved by the superbrain and had reached the level of a low-grade cultivation technique. It was much faster than the ordinary evergreen technique. However, Yi Xing still felt that it was not enough. Time passed by with the swelling feeling. Yi Xing only knew that he was desperately absorbing the surging blood energy in his body. As for the passage of time, he had already ignored it. After an unknown amount of time, the medicinal power of the scarlet blood spirit mushroom gradually decreased. However, the swelling feeling in Xing's body had improved. He did not know how much medicinal power his flesh and bones had absorbed, but he felt as if his entire body was filled with strength. He scanned his body. In his dantian, the second star ring had already reached the limit of its brilliance. It was no different from the first star ring. Moreover, there was already a third star ring outside the second star ring. It was just that it was much dimmer than the first two. The symbol of the 9th stage of the martial path was the number of star rings in the dantian. 1 star ring was the first stage, and 2 star rings were the second stage. Now that Yi Xing's dantian had a 3rd star ring, it meant that his cultivation had unknowingly broken through to the 3rd stage of the martial path while he was absorbing the medicinal power of the scarlet blood spirit mushroom. Yi Xing's heart was filled with great joy. He had broken through to the 2nd stage of the martial path in just half a month, and his cultivation had broken through again. It was obvious that he had made the right choice to enter the Emerald Cloud Mountain range to gain experience. No matter what, being nurtured in a greenhouse would not be as fast as experiencing the wind and rain outside. Soon, the swelling feeling in Yi Xing's body disappeared completely. He clenched his fist and exerted force with his entire body. A series of crackling sounds came from within his body. Although it was impossible to hear how many crackling sounds there were, the superbrain had recorded it clearly. There were 21 muffled sounds and 185 crispy sounds. Before this, there were only 170 crispy sounds. In just a short period of time after consuming the scarlet blood spirit mushroom, Yi Xing's bone explosion fist cultivation had greatly increased by a level. Although there was no swelling feeling in Yi Xing's body, there was still a large amount of medicinal power of the scarlet blood spirit mushroom. Once he had completely absorbed it, it would not take long for his bone explosion fist to reach the perfection realm. How powerful would it be to reach the perfection realm with 206 echoes of the bone explosion fist? Yi Xing was looking forward to it. The competition in the new book list was fierce. Brothers, urgently requesting for recommendation tickets. Chapter 15. Yi Xing looked outside the cave.
Between the cracks of the stone, there was already a faint light.
It was already dawn. Absorbing the scarlet blood Ganoderma had taken an entire night. After a sleepless night, Yi Xing did not feel tired at all. Instead, he was full of energy. He felt that his body was full of energy. He felt uncomfortable if he did not move his muscles and bones. 3rd stage of the martial path, and the perfect explosive bone fist is close to perfection. I wonder what level my strength has reached? Yi Xing asked himself. Without a reference, he could not judge.
What he could be sure of was that a martial disciple of the same stage would not be as strong as him. He just did not know if he could compete with a true martial artist of the fourth stage of the martial path. If I use the super brain scanning ability to find the opponent's weakness, I will not be afraid of the fourth stage of the martial path. As for under normal conditions, I will have to try to find out. Yi Xing clenched his fists. He was very confident. He pushed aside the boulder that sealed the entrance of the cave and walked out. It was dawn, and the air in the Green Cloud Mountain range was very fresh. He took a deep breath and felt very wonderful. There was a kind of carefree taste. The energy in his body was vigorous. Yi Xing was eager to vent. He began to practice the explosive bone fist. Every move, every style, there were several crisp sounds at the same time. When Yi Xing finished practicing the perfect set of explosive bone fist, there were 206 sounds. There were 20 muffled sounds and 186 crisp sounds. After practicing the explosive bone fist once, there was one more crisp sound compared to the previous time in the cave. It could be seen that the scarlet blood Ganoderma's medicinal energy was quite a lot in his body. In the following period of time, whether it was the explosive bone fist or the evergreen technique, he would make rapid progress.
At this time, the sky was already bright. Yi Xing continued on his journey back to Azure Leaf Village. On the way back, Yi Xing did not look for herbs. Instead, he was focused on hurrying. His speed was much faster. 3 days later, he had already left the Azure Cloud Mountain range. At noon, Yi Xing returned to Green Leaf Village. This is the blood-accumulating grass, worth 2,500 taels of silver. This is the Emperor's blood grass, worth 3,700 taels of silver. This is the Chinese knotweed, worth 3,400 taels of silver. Ah, there's also the metal elemental flower, beauty cleansing grass, elemental gathering fruit. These are all medicinal ingredients that are worth several hundred to over 1,000 taels of silver. Young Master Yi Xing, the total value of these medicinal ingredients is close to 20,000 taels of silver. Where did you get so many medicinal ingredients? In a medicinal store in Qingye village, the shopkeeper looked at the medicinal ingredients that Yi Xing took out with a face full of surprise. His voice was filled with shock. In Qingye village, there were also quite a few hunters who entered Qingyun mountain range to search for medicinal ingredients. However, this medicinal ingredient store had never purchased so many medicinal ingredients from any hunter before. Even a martial warrior hunter would not have such a bountiful harvest in one trip to the mountains. Yi Xing smiled faintly. Shopkeeper, do you accept it or not? If you accept it, you have to keep it a secret for me. Otherwise, I'll smash your shop. Yes, of course. I swear, I will definitely not mention young Master Yi Xing. If he sold this batch of medicinal ingredients, he would be able to earn at least 20,000 taels of silver. If he changed hands, he would be able to earn a few thousand taels of silver. There was no reason to not do business. The shopkeeper counted the medicinal ingredients and said, "The total is 18,770 taels of silver. I'll round it up for young Master Yi Xing and make it 19,000 taels of silver. How about it?" "Deal." Yi Xing nodded. In the blink of an eye, he had an additional 19,000 taels of silver on him. Not long after, the shopkeeper of a weapon store in Qingye village spoke with an even more shocked tone. "These 4 bows and arrows are all strong bows with a strength of 6 stones. They are all worth 5,000 taels of silver. This long saber. It's actually a middle-grade weapon and is worth 32,000 taels of silver. Deal." Yi Xing no longer cared about the price. It was fine as long as he got rid of it. He said, "Shopkeeper, remember the rules and keep it a secret for me. Otherwise, you know the consequences." "Young Master Yi Xing, don't worry. Even if I lose my head, I definitely won't say a word." The shopkeeper made a solemn vow and said, "This is 52,000 taels of silver. Keep it well." Yi Xing put down all the weapons on him and took the silver. He then pointed at a strong bow hanging in the middle of the wall and said, "I want this bow." Yi Xing's cultivation had already reached the 3rd stage of the martial path. His perfect bone-exploding fist would soon reach perfection. His strength was much stronger than when he was at the 2nd stage of the martial path. An iron bow with a strength of 6 stones was already too light for him. He needed a stronger bow. Young Master Yi Xing has good eyesight. This is the treasure of our store. It is the only strong bow with a strength of 9 stones. It's called One Cauldron Bow. The shopkeeper walked to the side of the One Cauldron Bow and said with a smile of exultation. After he finished speaking, he looked at Yi Xing and his tone changed slightly. However, young Master Yi Xing, to draw this bow, you need at least 1 cauldron of strength. The strength of 1 stone was 120 pounds. 1 cauldron of strength was equivalent to 10 stones of strength. 1,200 pounds of strength. For a martial disciple at the 3rd stage of the martial path, it would be difficult to draw even once, let alone shoot accurately. I want it. Also, give me a quiver of arrows. Yi Xing nodded. Right now, even a bow with a strength of 9 stones was too light for him. This 1 cauldron bow was just what he wanted. If Yi Xing wanted to buy it, the shopkeeper would definitely sell it to him. He took down the 1 cauldron bow and took out 50 arrows from the side and said, "These are sound-breaking arrows. 1 arrow is 20 taels of silver. The price of the 1 cauldron bow is 20,000 taels of silver. Since young Master Yi Xing and our store have done such a big business, we will give you these sound-breaking arrows for free." Okay. Yi Xing was not polite. He counted out 20,000 taels of silver and handed it to the shopkeeper. He put the 50 sound-breaking arrows into his quiver and left the store with the 1 cauldron bow. The medicinal herbs and weapons that Yi Xing sold this time were worth tens of thousands of taels of silver. If he sold them in the Ye family's store, it would definitely shock the Ye family and they would definitely question him. Therefore, Yi Xing sold them to other stores and told them to keep it a secret. Although he was not afraid of trouble, he did not want to cause any trouble. After leaving the weapons store, Yi Xing went to the Ye family. Although he did not have many feelings for his parents, this time he did not ask for their opinion and disappeared for half a month. Now that he was back, it was necessary to report to them. At the same time, Yi Xing also wanted to share the news that he had reached the 3rd stage of the martial path with his parents. As for the excuse, he had already thought of it. He had a fortuitous encounter in the Green Cloud Mountain range and accidentally ate a precious medicinal herb which increased his cultivation. The original owner was a filial son. Even though he had died, he still had an instinctive desire to be close to his parents. Yi Xing had taken over his body and naturally had to comply with his wishes. After walking one street, Yi Xing frowned slightly. He was being followed. Although Yi Hu was hiding, he was unable to avoid Yi Xing's eyes. Ever since he fought with Yi Xing in the Yi family's weapon store, Yi Hu had always wanted to teach Yi Xing a lesson. However, since then, Yi Xing did not return to the Ye family, causing Yi Hu to miss several times. Today, Yi Hu was wandering around Greenleaf Village and saw Yi Xing again. Naturally, he secretly followed him. Moreover, when Yi Xing was about to leave the village, Yi Hu quickened his pace and circled around to the front of Yi Xing from another street. In a remote alley on the outskirts of Qingye village, Yi Xing was stopped by Yi Hu. This alley was very remote and empty. It was a shortcut to the Ye family. Yi Xing knew that Yi Hu was in front of him but still walked in. He felt that there was no need to change his path. Yi Hu crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Yi Xing mockingly. "Yi Xing, you finally showed yourself. Where the hell have you been these days?" Yi Xing's face revealed a harmless smile. "I went to the Green Cloud Mountain Range for a walk." "You went to the Green Cloud Mountain Range? Hey! I think you ran off somewhere and went crazy for a while." The Green Cloud Mountain Range was a dangerous place. Yi Hu did not believe that Yi Xing would dare to go there. His face revealed a smirk that deserved a beating. "Yi Xing, do you know what happened to the Ye family in the half-month you were gone?" "What happened?" The smile on Yi Xing's face disappeared. Yi Hu was smiling so happily. It was clear that the things that happened to him were not good. Yi Hu smirked. He. "Yi Xing, congratulations. Your brother Yi Chen is dead. Now you don't have to worry about being abandoned by your parents, he. "What did you say?" Yi Xing's face changed. Although his soul came from Earth, the same bloodline flowed in his body as Yi Chen's. Yi Chen was his younger brother, his blood kin. After Yi Chen was born, Yi Xing had never blamed him for taking away his parents' love. He only hoped that Yi Chen would grow up well and have a bright future. He was once an orphan. Although he had his pride and determination,
In reality, he longed for family. He didn't feel any familial love from his parents, but he could feel it from his blood-related younger brother. When Yi Chen was born, he had only seen him once. However, it was that one time that Yi Chen's small figure was branded in Yi Xing's superbrain and would exist forever. Now that he suddenly heard that Yi Chen was dead, he could not believe it. Yi Hu was very happy with Yi Xing's reaction. He continued to smirk. Yi Xing, don't doubt it. This is absolutely true. Yi Chen has been dead for 7 days. Hee hee. The family head's bloodline has reached its end. In 10 days, the main house's messenger will come to Qingye village. My big brother, as a true martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path, will go to the main house to learn. When my big brother returns, he will definitely be of the 5th stage of the martial path. Hee hee. When that time comes, who will be more qualified than my big brother to take over the family head's position? Ha ha ha. I heard that when Yi Chen was born, there was a natural phenomenon. Everyone said that he would be a great person in the future. Who would have thought that he would die so soon? Ha ha. The heavens have eyes. Ever since Yi Xing came to the starry continent, he had never been this angry. Even when others wanted to take his life, he was not this angry. He rushed in front of Yi Hu in a single stride, raised his hand, and sent a slap towards Yi Hu. You dare to hit me? This time, I will teach you a lesson. Seeing Yi Xing rush up, Yi Hu was excited. He raised his hand to block and at the same time, threw a punch at Yi Xing's face. Slap. Unexpectedly, Yi Hu was not able to block Yi Xing's slap and was immediately slapped hard in the face by Yi Xing. What a tragedy. It did not rush into the new book list. Brothers, if you like this book, please go to Qidian and give me a recommendation vote. Please. Chapter 16. Yi Xing was truly enraged. He scanned Yi Hu with his eyes. Yi Xing knew exactly how Yi Hu was channeling his power, so he naturally knew how Yi Hu was going to block it. Therefore, Yi Xing changed the trajectory of his palm midway, causing Yi Hu to block the air and slap him. Crackle! When the slap landed on Yi Hu's face, Yi Xing's body exploded as he used the power of the explosive bone fist. How terrifying was the power of the explosive bone fist at the 3rd stage of the martial path. Yi Hu's fist had been aimed at Yi Xing's face, but before it could land on Yi Xing's body, he was sent flying by Yi Xing's slap. In an instant, there was a blood-curdling scream. Blood and broken teeth flew everywhere. Yi Hu was dizzy and there was a conspicuous handprint on his face. This slap is for my younger brother. Yi Xing shouted after the slap. Then with another big stride, he rushed towards Yi Hu. Yi Hu landed and staggered, almost falling. Before he could stabilize his body, Yi Xing was already in front of him. At this moment, Yi Xing's head was spinning and he couldn't tell north from south. Yi Xing's second slap had already come. Slap Yi Hu was slapped a second time. There was another blood-curdling scream and his body was sent flying again. On the other side of his face, there was also a conspicuous handprint. This slap is for the old me. Yi Xing roared, his rage soaring to the heavens. This slap is for the old me. After Yi Xing finished speaking, Yi Hu landed on the ground. After being slapped twice in a row, Yi Hu was completely dumbfounded. How could he stand firm? His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Yi Xing took another step forward and kicked Yi Hu. Yi Hu was sent flying again. His body curled up like a shrimp and he let out another blood-curdling scream. Then with a bang, Yi Hu crashed into the wall of the alley and fainted. This kick is because you angered me. Yi Xing shouted. The anger in his heart finally dissipated a little. As a 3rd stage martial artist, Yi Xing knew that Yi Hu wouldn't die from this attack. He didn't look at the unconscious Yi Hu and quickly walked towards the Ye family. He didn't believe Yi Hu's story. He didn't believe that his brother would die just like that after being born. However, his rationality told him that Yi Hu wouldn't tell such a lie. He wanted to go back and verify it. Yi Xing ran all the way back to the Ye family. When he entered the Ye family residence, the people he met along the way all looked at him strangely. Moreover, there was not the slightest bit of joy in the entire Yi residence, nor were there any decorations or decorations. For the Ye family who had just given birth to their second child, This was very abnormal. This further proved that what Yi Hu said was true. However, Yi Xing still had a glimmer of hope in his heart.
Soon, Yi Xing returned to the master mansion. As soon as he entered the mansion, he saw his maid, Shaoqing.
Young master.
Shaoqing suddenly saw Yi Xing and exclaimed. She quickly walked over. Young master, where have you been for the past half a month?
The master is very angry.
Shaoqing, tell me, how is my brother? Yi Xing grabbed Shaoqing's arms and asked. Yi Xing didn't care whether Yi Feihong was angry or not. However, he couldn't help but care about his brother's life and death.
Shaoqing's face revealed a sorrowful expression. Young master, he has already passed away.
Boom. Although his rationality told him that Yi Hu was telling the truth, Yi Xing's mind still buzzed when he heard Shaoqing's confirmation. It was somewhat hard to accept. In his heart, he didn't feel any familial affection for his parents. He only felt some sentimental attachment to the original owner. As for his brother, Yi Chen, he was a true family member.
However, damned heavens, I was an orphan on Earth.
Now that I've come to the astral continent, I finally have a brother. Are you still going to make me an orphan?
Yi Xing roared in his heart, unwilling to accept this.
Take this for me and send it to my room.
Yi Xing handed a bow and a quiver full of sonic arrows to Shaoqing, then walked toward the main hall.
Yi Chen's death had touched a chord in Yi Xing's heart. Originally, he had his pride and his persistence. The familial affection in his heart had long been hidden, but Yi Chen's death had awakened it. Perhaps it was because of Yi Chen's death or because of the original owner's sentimental attachment. Yi Xing's perception of his parents had grown much closer. He understood that Yi Feihong and Lu Yi had placed all their hopes on Yi Chen. Now that Yi Chen had passed away, their hopes had been dashed and they must be feeling terrible.
Now, as their only son, or rather, as the person who had taken over their only son's body, it was only right for him to accompany them.
Yi Tianchong, don't let me find any evidence. Otherwise, I'll never forgive you and your bloodline. Yi Feihong, how many times have I told you that I, Yi Tianchong, am a member of the Ye family in life and a ghost of the Ye family in death? In this lifetime, I'll never do anything to let the Ye family down. No matter how much I want Qing'er to be the head of the family, I'll never do anything that would incur the wrath of men and gods. Moreover, Yi Chen wasn't the only one who was killed. Yi Fei of the Yi Yuan family was born a day later than Yi Chen, but wasn't he also assassinated on that day? Even if I have a reason to kill Yi Chen, I have no reason to kill Yi Fei. All right, Yi Tianchong, you've finally said what's in your heart. You want Chener to die and you want to seize the position of head of the family for your bloodline. And you're still saying that you didn't do it? Yi Feihong, you're unreasonable. I'm just saying reasons. Do you understand reasons? You're the one who killed Chener. Yi Tianchong, as an elder, don't be a coward. You're already possessed. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Yi Xing had just arrived outside the main hall when he heard a fierce argument coming from inside. It was his father, Yi Feihong, and the first elder, Yi Tianchong, arguing. Soon, Yi Xing saw the first elder, Yi Tianchong, walking out angrily. Yi Tianchong's face was red and his beard was crooked. He was obviously in a fit of anger. When he suddenly saw Yi Xing in front of him, he could not help but feel angry. You're a waste of food. Yi Tianchong scolded Yi Xing fiercely. He quickly walked past Yi Xing and left without looking back. Yi Xing clenched his fist and almost punched the old man's face.
However, the other party was an elder of the family after all.
He was of the same generation as his grandfather who had passed away. Yi Xing suppressed the urge to punch him. It was not until Yi Tianchong disappeared from sight that Yi Xing stepped into the main hall. Yi Feihong stood alone in the hall with his eyes wide open and panting. When he saw Yi Xing, the anger in his eyes burned even more fiercely. Father, I'm back. Yi Xing walked forward. You bastard, you still know how to die and come back. Yi Feihong was like a lion with its hair standing on end. He roared and walked toward Yi Xing, walking in front of Yi Xing. Yi Feihong shouted again. At the same time, he slapped Yi Xing. Why didn't you die, you waste of food? The death of his younger brother, Yi Chen, had evoked the long-hidden affection in Yi Xing's heart. In addition, The original owner instinctively wanted to be closer to his parents. When Yi Xing returned, he decided to tell his parents about his cultivation progress. He wanted to improve their relationship, however. Yi Feihong's words caused the affection in Yi Xing's heart to instantly fall into an ice cave. Yi Xing's eyes scanned the trajectory of Yi Feihong's slap. If Yi Xing dodged with all his strength, he could completely avoid this slap. However, Yi Xing did not dodge. He stood in the same place, not moving at all. His heart was already cold. Slap. Yi Xing was slapped. His face was slapped to the side and he felt a burning pain. Yi Feihong's slap was not light. However, for some reason, although there was pain on his face, Yi Xing's heart suddenly felt much better. The original owner's instinctive wish and the abnormal father-son relationship between him and Yi Feihong were all slapped away by Yi Feihong. Yi Xing took this slap, but he got rid of the original owner's wish and relieved the depression in his heart. It was worth it. He originally wanted to tell Yi Feihong everything, but now there was no need to say any more. He only needed to wait 10 days later when the clan meeting was held. He wanted to soar into the sky and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat to seize the opportunity to go to the main family of Azure Sky City. Then, he would leave Green Leaf Village without any attachment. He would wholeheartedly pursue martial arts and head towards the wider sky to explore the path of becoming a peerless expert. Your useless son is already dead. Yi Xing really wanted to say this to Yi Feihong, but he still held it in. He said indifferently, "My life is tougher." What he said was the truth. The I in his words was not referring to the Yi Xing of the past, but himself. Something happened to him on Earth, but in a place like the Star Continent, he took over someone else's body and came back to life. If this was not tough, then what was? Yi Xing's reply made Yi Feihong even more furious. However, no matter how angry he was, no matter how much he disliked this son in front of him, he was still his son. He had already slapped him once, so it was hard for him to do it a second time. Scram to the backyard and don't come out. For the next few days, I don't want to see a useless piece of trash like you wasting food. Yi Feihong took a few deep breaths, suppressed his anger, and pointed outside the hall. Yi Xing did not say anything else and turned to leave. When he returned to his residence, Shaoqing saw the slap mark on Yi Xing's face and was shocked. "Oh, young master, you're the patriarch's only son. How could he bear to hit you? Let me apply some ointment for you." With that, she went to look for the ointment. Yi Xing held her back and said, "This injury is not a problem. First, tell me, what happened to my brother's death?" With Shaoqing's explanation, Yi Xing finally understood the cause of Yi Chen's death. It turned out that he was secretly killed by someone. With Yi Chen's death, the one who benefited the most was the first elder's bloodline. Because Yi Xing was known to have a useless body, with the death of Yi Feihong's second child, the position of patriarch naturally could not be passed down. As for the first elder's grandson, Yi Qing, he was the most outstanding descendant of the Ye family and had the most hope to take over the position of patriarch. No wonder Yi Feihong and first elder Yi Tianchong quarreled so fiercely. It was not without reason that Yi Feihong suspected Yi Tianchong. However, Yi Xing could not understand why when Yi Chen was assassinated, Yi Fei, who had nothing to do with the fight for the position of patriarch, was also assassinated. Recommendation tickets, crying for recommendation tickets, crying for recommendation tickets. Brothers, I need your protection and support. Requesting recommendation tickets. Chapter 17. While Shaoqing was applying the ointment on Yi Xing's face, Yi Hu's face was also being applied by his maid. After Yi Xing left, Yi Hu quickly woke up. Thinking about how he had been beaten up by Yi Xing, who he had always looked down on, he felt incomparably humiliated. He had no face left, and he couldn't help but cry. He didn't dare to tell anyone about this, nor did he want anyone to know. He wrapped his head in a cloth and secretly snuck home. If he had beaten up Yi Xing this time, the first thing he would have done when he got home would have been to confess to his grandfather and ask for his protection. But now, he had been beaten up by Yi Xing. If he told his grandfather, not only would Yi Tianchong not protect him, he would even call him worse than trash and might even give him a slap. Therefore, he didn't dare to let his grandfather know about this. Other than his maid, there was only one other person who knew about his injury, and that was his brother,
Yi Qing. The first thing he did when he sneaked home was not to apply the ointment, but to ask his maid to invite his brother, Yi Qing, over.
Yi Qing was the same age as Yi Xing.
He was also 16 years old this year, but 3 months ago, he had already cultivated internal strength and became a martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path. He was the first in the younger generation of the Ye family.
Little Hu, are you sure it was Yi Xing who beat you up like this? Is there someone else who is secretly making a move?
Yi Qing looked at Yi Hu's appearance and felt his heart ache, but he also couldn't believe Yi Hu's words. Everyone knew that Yi Xing had a trash body, and Yi Hu was a martial disciple of the 3rd stage of the martial path. Even if Yi Xing trained his body to the extreme, he would only be on par with a martial disciple of the 3rd stage of the martial path.
How could he beat Yi Hu to the point where he couldn't fight back?
Brother, I'm sure. I'm 100% sure.
At that time, there were only Yi Xing and me. I don't know why, but when he slapped me, I couldn't block it. Then he hit me until I was dizzy. He slapped me twice and kicked me hard.
Brother, I've never been so humiliated in my life.
You have to avenge me.
Beat him until his mother can't recognize him.
Yi Hu's eyes were filled with tears as he sobbed.
Yi Qing patted Yi Hu's shoulder and said,
Little Hu, don't worry.
The humiliation you suffered, I'll return it to Yi Xing 10 times over.
He's just a trash body.
Even if he had a fortuitous encounter and his body reached the extreme, he can only be a martial disciple for the rest of his life. He won't be able to inherit the position of the head of the family. Right now, he's just relying on the fact that his father is the head of the family. When I take over the position of the head of the family, I'll definitely teach that trash a lesson.
Little Hu, when the time comes, I'll let you take care of him personally.
Yi Hu's eyes emitted a resentful gaze as he said, No, brother. I've waited too long for you to take over the position of the head of the family. Now I want him to suffer.
Yi Qing's face was unhappy as he said, Even though he's trash, he's still the son of the head of the family. If he doesn't come out of the house, do you think I'll be able to fight my way into the house?
Yi Hu's gaze shifted as he said, Brother, Yi Xing has the strength of the 3rd stage of the martial path. I'm guessing that he'll definitely participate in this family meeting to show off his outstanding strength.
When the time comes, you can openly beat him up during the family meeting. Ruthlessly beat him up in front of the main house's envoys and trample on his dignity.
Let him have no face left and taste the feeling of being humiliated by others.
Yi Qing nodded his head. Okay, as long as he dares to participate in the family meeting, I'll definitely ruthlessly teach him a lesson. After returning to the Ye family, Yi Xing spent every day in the backyard cultivating. He didn't take a single step out of the house. The scarlet blood spirit mushroom's medicinal effects were still abundant. These days, Yi Xing's progress was remarkable. On this day, in the backyard of the house, besides Yi Xing, there was no one else. Pang, 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 pang. Yi Xing was currently practicing the bone explosion fist. Every time he struck out, there would be a few crisp sounds. After finishing a set of bone explosion fist, Yi Xing's entire body's bones rang out. There wasn't a single muffled sound, all of them were crisp sounds. This meant that Yi Xing's 206 bones in his body were all in place. The perfect bone explosion fist had reached the realm of perfection. Yi Xing let out a long breath.
The air in front of him rippled and an arrow of qi shot out over 3 meters before disappearing.
Breathing out like an arrow was something only a true martial artist who had produced internal strength could do. Yi Xing had yet to produce internal strength. His flesh and blood couldn't be compared to a martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path.
However, he had a strong set of bones that far surpassed a martial artist of the 4th stage of the martial path.
This allowed him to breathe out like an arrow at the 3rd stage of the martial path. Tomorrow is the day of the clan meeting. My perfect bone explosion fist has reached perfection, and my cultivation has also consolidated to the late 3rd stage of the martial path. Martial disciples of the same stage are no match for me. I should be able to compete with a true martial artist, right? Yi Xing clenched his fists. He was incomparably confident in his heart. The clan meeting will be the moment when I, Yi Xing, soar to the skies. With me there, I am invincible. No one will be able to stop me from taking first place. I, Yi Xing, will definitely be among those who will head to Azure Sky City's main house.
Once he thought about the fact that the main house of Azure Sky City had even higher-level martial arts, Yi Xing's heart was filled with excitement. With the super brain, he wouldn't complain about having too many martial arts. No matter how many there were, he would be able to learn them all. He was only afraid that he wouldn't be able to learn them. And now, he had already learned the evergreen art and bone explosion fist, these two lower-level martial arts. As for other martial arts, he was thirsty for knowledge. The main house's envoy should be here today. Coming from the main house of Azure Sky City, the envoy must be an expert. Yi Xing guessed. Yi Xing's guess was right. The main house's envoy had arrived. However, if he were to see the main house's envoy, he would definitely be shocked. The main house's envoy that Yi Feihong treated with respect as an honored guest was actually a 17 or 18-year-old youth. For this clan meeting, the Greenleaf Village's branch family is honored to have the young lord make an appearance. In the main hall of the Ye family's main hall, the patriarch Yi Feihong was in the lead. Along with many other elders, they all respectfully bowed to the young man sitting in the patriarch's seat. Azure Sky City's Ye family's young lord, Yi Yunlong, was a famous genius in the entire Azure Sky City. He wasn't even 18 years old, but his cultivation had already reached the peak of the 5th stage of the martial path. Compared to many of the branch family's patriarchs, he was even stronger. Yi Yunlong was dressed in white and had a jade crown on his head. He held a fan in his hand. He was an elegant young master. Beside him was a beautiful young lady. Her hands were wrapped around a long sword. She was his sword attendant. Yi Yunlong closed the fan in his hand and said, "Everyone, there is no need to be so courteous. The Greenleaf Village's Ye family is one of the most important branch families of our Yi clan. When Elder Tian Nan was still alive, he had made great contributions to our Yi clan. Although Elder Tian Nan had passed away 3 years ago, my father still remembers him. Therefore, he specially ordered Yunlong to come to Greenleaf Village. The first reason is to select a genius from the Greenleaf Village's Ye family, hoping that there would be someone like Elder Tian Nan, strengthening our Yi clan's strength." Yi Tian Nan, the previous patriarch of the Greenleaf Village's Ye family, was also Yi Xing's deceased grandfather. His cultivation had reached the 6th stage of the martial path. When he was alive, he was not only the patriarch of the Greenleaf Village's Ye family, he also held the position of Azure Sky City's patriarch. When Yi Tian Nan was alive, the Greenleaf Village's Ye family was extremely powerful. It was the strongest branch among the many branches of the Ye family. Now, the Greenleaf Village's Ye family had declined a lot. "Thank you, patriarch." Yi Feihong and the others' expressions were somewhat emotional as they excitedly said. Yi Tiannan was the pride of the Greenleaf Village's Ye family. Now that he had passed away 3 years ago, the patriarch still remembered to come and pay his respects. Moreover, they sent their young lord to pay his respects. This showed that the patriarch still attached great importance to the Ye family of Greenleaf Village. Tomorrow was the day of the patriarch's meeting. Naturally, today was the day to pay respects to Yi Tiannan. A group of people set out and headed towards Yi Tiannan's grave. After paying respects to Yi Tiannan, the Ye family naturally gave Yi Yunlong a generous reception. There was no need to say anything more. The next day, the Greenleaf Village's Ye family meeting was held as scheduled at the martial arts practice field. On the side of the pavilion, Yi Yunlong sat at the head of the table. Patriarch Yi Feihong and Great Elder Yi Tianchong accompanied him on his left and right. His sword servants stood behind him. The rest of the elders sat on the lower seats. The Greenleaf Village's Ye family did not have as many members as the patriarch, but they still had a few hundred people. In Yi Xing's generation, there were dozens of people between the ages of 13 and 17. However, there were some who were the same as Yi Xing. They were crippled and did not have the qualifications to participate in the patriarch's meeting. Those who were qualified to participate in the patriarch's meeting were only about 30 people. When Yi Xing arrived at the martial arts practice field, there were already many clansmen of the Ye family gathered here. They were all surrounding the martial arts practice field. Only the juniors who were participating in the patriarch's meeting could enter the martial arts practice field. Everyone's attention was on the martial arts practice field. No one noticed Yi Xing's arrival. However, when Yi Xing walked into the martial arts practice field, he suddenly became the focus of everyone's attention. Why did young Master Yi Xing also go over? Isn't he crippled?
He doesn't have the qualifications to participate in the Patriarch's meeting? For a moment, there was a lot of discussion around the martial arts practice field.
On the side of the pavilion, Yi Fei-hong and the other elders of the Ye family were also attracted to Yi Xing when they saw him enter the stage.
He's a crippled. What is he going to do?
He doesn't know the rules at all.
An elder angrily rebuked.
It was someone from the Great Elders faction.
Crippled. Hearing this, Yi Yunlong also looked at Yi Xing and said, maybe he really is ignorant. Whose child is he?
This is the young master of the Patriarch's residence, the Great Elder said with a cold snort. Bastard, causing trouble for me and embarrassing me.
Yi Fei-hong's expression was extremely ugly. At this moment, he wished he hadn't slapped Yi Xing to death with that slap.
On the martial arts practice field, the younger generation of the Ye family was also stunned when they saw Yi Xing coming over.
Many of them roared with laughter. Yi Qing and Yi Hu looked at each other. They were right. Yi Xing had indeed come to participate in the Patriarch's meeting. Brother Xing, what are you doing here?
Now that the Patriarch's envoy is also here, you've embarrassed Uncle again.
Uncle will be angry. A youth who was about the same age as Yi Xing ran to Yi Xing's side and said in a low voice.
This was the son of the third elder, Yi Fighting.
His name was Yi Feng. He was 1 year younger than Yi Xing and had a better relationship with the original owner.
I've already sensed the stars and stepped into the martial arts path.
I'm here to participate in the Patriarch's meeting, Yi Xing said with a slight smile.
At this moment, the Patriarch of the Patriarch's fourth stage of the martial path, Yi Feizhou, walked over and said to Yi Xing in a bad mood.
Go go go.
In front of the Patriarch's envoy. Do you want to throw away the Patriarch's face?
Hurry up and leave.
I'm already at the third stage of the martial path. As a member of the Ye family, am I not allowed to participate in the Patriarch's meeting?
Yi Xing said loudly.
As his voice spread out, the scene immediately became silent.
Everyone's face was filled with astonishment. Even Yi Qing and Yi Hu were no exception,
rolling all over the floor begging for a recommendation vote.
Chapter 18.
Other than the maid Shaoqing, only Yi Fei-hong, Lu Yi, and Lu Shuangling knew about Yi Xing's ability to sense the power of the stars. To be able to sense the power of the stars at the age of 16, even if he didn't have a crippled body, it wasn't something worth publicizing. Moreover, it happened to be the birth of the second child, so Yi Fei-hong and Lu Yi obviously didn't take this matter to heart, let alone mention it to others.
And Lu Shuangling didn't take Yi Xing seriously at all.
After the incident, she almost forgot about this trivial matter that she thought was insignificant, so of course, she didn't spread the news. Whether or not one could sense the power of the stars was something that couldn't be determined from appearance. The Ye family members all thought that Yi Xing was still a crippled body that couldn't sense the power of the stars. At this moment, when they suddenly heard that Yi Xing had stepped into the martial path, and that he was at the third level of the martial path, how could the Ye family members not be shocked to the point that their jaws dropped to the ground?
In the pavilion, Yi Fei-hong's eyes revealed a look of shock.
A month ago, Yi Xing had just sensed the power of the stars, so how could he have reached the third level of the martial path? If Yi Xing really had the cultivation of the third level of the martial path?
Yi Fei-hong's heart couldn't help but surge. Then, wouldn't the position of the head of the family still be passed down?
Although he hadn't become a true martial artist at the age of 16, and his future achievements were limited, Yi Xing had reached the third level of the martial path from being able to sense the stars in a short month.
This made Yi Fei-hong's heart surge with confidence.
However, when Yi Fei-hong thought of the slap he gave Yi Xing 10 days ago when he returned home, the fluctuations in his heart sank again.
Yi Fei-hong didn't take Yi Xing to heart, so after slapping Yi Xing, he didn't think too much about it. At this moment, he realized that the father-son relationship between him and Yi Xing seemed to have disappeared.
Uncle Fei-hong, what's going on?
Yi Yunlong's voice sounded in Yi Fei-hong's ears.
Yi Fei-hong looked embarrassed and said, Young master, Yi Xing has already sensed the power of the stars and is not a cripple. However, I did not pay much attention to him and did not know that he has already reached the third stage of the martial path.
I also do not know if what he said is true or false. Cultivating to the third stage of the martial path in a month was simply too shocking. Yi Fei-hong did not specifically point out that Yi Xing had only sensed the power of the stars a month ago. Yi Yunlong took in Yi Feihong's expression and understood in his heart. He said, "True gold fears no fire. Since he doesn't have a useless body, let him participate in the clan meeting." Since Yi Xing had spoken up, no one objected. They did not even need to test whether Yi Xing's cultivation was real. Yi Hu's eyes flashed with excitement. Even if Yi Xing was a martial disciple of the third stage of the martial path, in his opinion, it was impossible for him to be Yi Qing's opponent. Moreover, Yi Xing's strength was not bad. The chances of him encountering Yi Qing were very high. He was looking forward to the scene of Yi Xing being beaten up by his brother Yi Qing. The rules of the clan meeting were very simple. 2-on-2 battles. The winner would advance and the winner would be eliminated. If one could enter the top 3, they would receive a reward from the clan. Especially the reward for first place. It was said that it was a middle-grade medicinal ingredient. For a small clan like the Ye family in Greenleaf Village, a middle-grade medicinal ingredient was considered an extremely precious item. In the past, there had not been such a high reward. This time, it was the Great Elder's strong request and the support of all the elders that the clan decided to use a middle-grade medicinal ingredient as a reward. As for the Great Elder's intention, it was very obvious. With Yi Qing, the only true martial artist of the younger generation, participating in the clan meeting, the first place would be none other than him. Originally, there were a total of 31 people participating in the clan meeting. In the first round, Yi Qing was a no-rounder. However, after adding Yi Xing, there were exactly 32 people participating in the clan meeting. There was no no-rounder in the first round. As the brightest star of the younger generation, Yi Qing was naturally arranged to be in the first round. His opponent was called Yi Dan, a 17-year-old martial disciple of the third stage of the martial path. Yi Dan knew that he was not Yi Qing's opponent, but he still tried his best to fight.
Unfortunately, there was a huge gap between the third stage of the martial path and the fourth stage of the martial path.
The gap was too big. The two exchanged blows for the first time. Yi Dan was sent flying by Yi Qing's palm. A martial artist with inner strength, compared to a martial disciple, was too terrifying and invincible. Under the shocked and worshipful gazes of the crowd, Yi Qing intentionally glanced at Yi Xing from the corner of his eyes. With a proud smile, he left the stage. The next few battles progressed relatively quickly. Nearly half of the younger generation participating in the clan meeting were in the second stage of the martial path.
In order to avoid the early elimination of the third stage of the martial path, in the first round, the second stage of the martial path opponents were all in the third stage of the martial path.
Naturally, the battles progressed relatively quickly. The ninth battle was Yi Xing. Not long after, it was his turn. His first opponent was also a martial disciple of the second stage of the martial path. She was only 14 years old and was called Yi Ji. She was the daughter of the head deacon. The head deacon of the Ye family was the confidant of the head of the family. However, Yi Ji did not put Yi Xing in her eyes. "Yi Xing, I have never heard of you being able to sense the power of the stars.
Now that you suddenly say that you have reached the third stage of the martial path, it is really hard to believe."
Yi Ji chuckled. Clearly, she did not believe that the former crippled body would one day have a higher cultivation than her. Yi Xing said indifferently, "Whether it is true or not, you will know once you try. Why bother guessing?" "Okay, I will test if it is true or not," Yi Ji shouted. She stretched out her jade-like palm and slapped Yi Xing consecutively. A crisp sound came from within her body. Low-grade martial art. Consecutive palm. At the same time, she also used the power of the exploding bone fist. The exploding bone fist was a fist technique to strengthen the bones. It was not a battle technique. If it was just a competition of strength, the exploding bone fist would be enough. As a girl, Yi Ji was naturally weaker in terms of strength. Naturally, she would use her strengths to avoid her weaknesses and use her martial arts to win. Yi Ji's consecutive palm was very rough. Yi Xing's eyes were like torches and he was not affected at all. With a burst of sound from within his body, he punched out and hit Yi Ji's palm. Yi Xing did not even use 30% of his strength. Yi Ji screamed and was pushed back by Yi Xing's punch. She was forced to retreat more than 10 steps. The palm that collided with Yi Xing's fist was painful. Her entire arm was soft and she could not use any strength. In one move, Yi Ji was defeated.
What they saw with their own eyes was more impactful than hearing Yi Xing say that he was in the third stage of the martial path.
The Ye family was shocked. Yi Xing did not use any martial arts. He only used the exploding bone fist and easily defeated Yi Ji, who was in the second stage of the martial path.
It was clear that his cultivation had reached the third stage of the martial path.
The former crippled body was now a third-stage martial disciple. This kind of change was really hard to believe for the Ye family.
In just 1 month, he actually reached the third stage of the martial path.
How is this possible?
Although Lu Shuangling was a relative of the Ye family, she was determined to be a member of the Ye family in the future.
She was also one of the 32 people who participated in the family meeting. When Yi Xing said that his cultivation had reached the third stage of the martial path, Lu Shuangling absolutely did not believe it. But now, she had no choice but to believe it. She was extremely shocked.
Fortuitous encounter. It seems that these days when he was not at home, he had a fortuitous encounter.
But fortuitous encounters cannot accompany a lifetime. Without fortuitous encounters, ordinary things will remain ordinary. He definitely cannot be compared to Brother Yi Qing. In the future, I still have to get closer to Brother Yi Qing, Lu Shuangling said in her heart. She did not know why, but when she saw Yi Xing's rise, she felt as if her heart was suffocating. It was very uncomfortable. The only person present who was not shocked by Yi Xing's strength was probably Yi Hu. He looked at Yi Xing's eyes, revealing a trace of ruthlessness and expectation. Humph. I'll let you be in the limelight now. The more you are in the limelight, the more face you will lose when my brother beats you up. Yi Hu was hoping that Yi Xing would meet him as soon as possible. However, what he did not expect was that after the first round of the competition ended, the juniors who entered the second round drew lots. He was actually in the same group as Yi Xing Yi, whose face was immediately covered with a layer of cold air. Being in the same group as Yi Xing made him instantly think of the scene where he was slapped and kicked twice by Yi Xing. However, those who did not know the inside story revealed excited expressions when they heard that Yi Xing and Yi Hu were in the same group. Yi Xing and Yi Hu had a conflict. This was a well-known fact. A month ago, Yi Xing had been taught a lesson by Yi Hu and had competed with him in rock climbing. In the end, he lost and even injured his head. Now, Yi Xing's cultivation was in the third stage of the martial path, the same as Yi Hu's cultivation. The Ye family wanted to see just how strong Yi Xing was and how strong he was compared to Yi Hu. The elder in charge of the family meeting, Yi Feizhou, obviously knew of the Ye family's expectations. Or perhaps he also wanted to know just how strong Yi Xing was. So he arranged for Yi Xing and Yi Hu's battle to be in the second round. The first round was still Yi Qing's turn. Simply and nimbly, he defeated his opponent in one move and won another round. Soon, it was time for the second round. Yi Xing walked into the center of the martial arts practice field with a faint smile on his face.
He looked at Yi Hu and waited for the latter to come up.
Yi Hu and Yi Xing were both in the third stage of the martial path, and both had just stepped into the third stage of the martial path not long ago. Who was stronger? The Ye family members all widened their eyes and looked at the martial arts practice field expectantly, waiting for the battle between Yi Xing and Yi Hu. However, Yi Hu's actions exceeded the Ye family's expectations. He did not walk into the martial arts practice field. Instead, he took a step forward and walked out from the crowd of juniors participating in the family meeting.
He said, "I admit defeat."
After being beaten up by Yi Xing last time, Yi Hu's heart was already traumatized. How would he dare to fight with Yi Xing again? Now, Yi Hu was waiting for his brother Yi Qing to avenge him and beat up Yi Xing. He definitely did not dare to fight with Yi Xing, admit defeat. Around the martial arts practice field, there was a snort of disdain. They were looking forward to the battle between Yi Xing and Yi Hu, but in the end, Yi Hu directly admitted defeat. They were very unhappy. On the stage, Great Elder Yi Tianchong's face was green with anger. He had always looked down on Yi Xing and said more than once that Yi Xing was a waste of food. But now, his grandson Yi Hu did not dare to fight with Yi Hu and was looked down upon by the Ye family. What was this? Wasn't he worse than a waste? Yi Tianchong was so angry that his nose was crooked. Today is still the same as before. Tomorrow will be 2 updates a day. Brothers, please vote for me. The Archer God will definitely be a good story. I will not disappoint everyone. Chapter 19. Who is this? Admitting defeat in the face of a martial artist of the same level, isn't that too cowardly? Yi Yunlong waved the fan in his hand and said disdainfully. Beside him, the great elder Yi Tianzhong's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. At this moment, Yi Feihong felt an unprecedented carefree feeling. He pointed out that Yi, who was the grandson of the great elder. Yi Yunlong chuckled. He didn't say anything in consideration of Yi Tianzhong's face. He used to have a useless body. How did he become a martial disciple of the third level of the martial path? Could it be that the patriarch position is going to be passed down in this bloodline? No, the patriarch position should belong to my bloodline. Qing'er, you must perform well and let the young master see your potential. Work hard to take back the patriarch position. Yi Tianzhong said in his heart. He placed all his hopes on Yi Qing. When Yi Tianzhong was young, he was the son of the Qingye village's patriarch. However, Yi Tiannan, who was of the same generation as him, was too outstanding. Even in the main family of Azure Sky City, Yi Tiannan was ranked among the top geniuses. In the end, his father passed the patriarch position to his nephew, Yi Tiannan. Yi Tianzhong had always been brooding over this matter. He wanted to take back the patriarch position. However, he couldn't compare to Yi Tiannan. His descendants couldn't compare to Yi Tiannan's descendants. When it came to the younger generation, his grandson Yi Qing was far ahead in this generation, leading the way. Only then did he finally see hope. As long as Yi Qing's performance was outstanding enough to surpass Yi Xing in all aspects, then he would put pressure on Yi Xing to imitate his father and pass the patriarch position to the most outstanding descendant. Yi Tianzhong's eyes shone as he looked at Yi Qing. Confidence gradually returned to his face. Yi, whose admission of defeat was scoffed at by many people who weren't part of the Ye family. However, as the competition progressed, everyone's attention was diverted. 2 hours later, the second round of the competition ended and the top 8 were decided. They were Yi Qing, Yi Xing, Yi Feng, Yi Yuan, Yi Lan, Yi Xian, and Lu Shuangling. Yi Qing was the son of the eldest son of the great elder, Yi Xing was the son of the patriarch, Yi Feng was the son of the third elder, Yi Yuan was the son of the second son of the great elder, Yi Yuan was the son of the second elder, Yi Lan was the daughter of the elder Chuan Gong, Yi Xing was from a side branch, and Lu Shuangling was the niece of the matriarch. Soon, the third round of the competition began. After drawing lots, Yi Qing against Yi Yuan, Yi Xing against Yi Yuan, Yi Feng against Yi Lan, and Yi Xian against Lu Shuangling. In this round, Yi Xing was still not matched up against Yi Qing. However, his opponent was Yi Yuan, the grandson of the first elder. Yi Yuan was 15 years old this year, and his cultivation had already reached the late third level of the martial path. He was much stronger than Yi Hu, who had just entered the third level of the martial path. Hearing Yi Feizhou, the host of the family meeting, announce their opponents, the Ye family members' eyes were filled with excitement. In this round, they could finally see how strong Yi Xing was. The first round was still Yi Qing's battle. He was as strong as ever. Even though his opponent was Yi Yuan, who was in the middle third level of the martial path, he was still defeated in one move. Although there was no suspense in this battle, the Ye family members were still amazed. The gap between a martial disciple and a martial artist was too big. Who could compete with Yi Qing for the first place in this family meeting? The second round, Yi Xing against Yi Yuan. Everyone's spirits were lifted. In their eyes, Yi Xing was like a cloud of fog, unable to be seen clearly. Now, it was time to see this cloud of fog clearly. Even Yi Feihong and the elders on the stage were all focused, unable to take their eyes off him. Yi Yunlong's eyes were also filled with interest. A former cripple suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and unexpectedly became a martial disciple in the third level of the martial path. This was a very interesting story. He really wanted to know how this story would develop next. Yi Xing, although I don't know how you turn from a cripple to a martial disciple in the third level of the martial path, I won't be as useless as Yi Hu and admit defeat to you. I want to see how big of a storm you, who used to be a cripple, can make today. Yi Yuan walked into the martial arts arena, his body emitting a strong aura. As a late third level of the martial path,
He was indeed a strong person in the martial disciple realm.
Yi Xing walked in at the same time and stopped in front of Yi Yuan. He said, "Yi Hu, admitting defeat is a wise choice." At the edge of the martial arts arena, Yi Hu felt a burning sensation on his face. 7 sections cut. Yi Yuan didn't say anything more to Yi Xing. With a loud shout, he directly attacked. 7 sections cut. A low-grade martial art. It was a martial art palm technique with a total of 7 styles. Each style had 7 variations, for a total of 49 variations. Each variation attacked the meridians, joints, and other weak points of the body. If one was hit, even if one had a lot of strength, they would be cut off and unable to use it. Yi Yuan's palm chopped straight at Yi Xing's shoulder joint. His hand was like a large knife. Yi Xing leaned to the side and avoided Yi Yuan's attack. Yi Yuan immediately changed his move. His hand was like a knife, cutting horizontally and chopping at Yi Xing's throat. Bone explosion fist. Yi Xing's body suddenly emitted the sound of bones exploding. He punched out, directly hitting the opponent's knife. Everyone's eyes widened at this moment. 2 martial disciples at the 3rd stage of the martial Dao were fighting. One was only using the bone burst fist to strengthen the body, while the other was using the 7-section slash to attack the enemy. Who was stronger and who was weaker? In everyone's hearts, they were obviously biased towards Yi Yuan. After all, martial arts were martial arts. They were specifically used to attack the enemy. There were techniques to use strength and various variations. On the other hand, the bone explosion fist was only used to strengthen the bones. It could only purely increase the strength. The result was beyond everyone's expectations. When the 2 fists collided, Yi Yuan's hand retracted as if it had been electrocuted. He felt that what he had chopped wasn't a fist, but a complete piece of iron. Yi Xing's hand bones were invulnerable. The 7 sections cut simply couldn't cut off the terrifying strength of Yi Xing's hand bones. Yi Yuan's hand was in pain, but Yi Xing's fist was unharmed. Taking advantage of the opponent's injury, Yi Xing shot forward and punched straight at Yi Yuan's chest. Bang! Yi Yuan screamed. His body was suddenly sent flying. He flew back a few meters before falling to the ground. His chi was interrupted by Yi Xing's punch. His hands pressed on his chest and his body curled up into a ball. He couldn't get up for a while.
Whether it was the other juniors in the martial arts practice field, the audience outside the martial arts practice field, or the patriarch and elders in the pavilion, there was only one expression at this moment.
Dumbfounded. 2 punches. Yi Xing actually used only 2 punches to defeat Yi Yuan in the late 3rd level of the martial path. Everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe it. Interesting. This kid actually practiced the bone explosion fist to the realm beyond perfection. Yi Yunlong's eyes also revealed a trace of surprise. If Yi Yunlong knew that Yi Xing not only practiced the bone explosion fist to the realm beyond perfection, but also refined all 206 bones in his body, he wouldn't just be a trace of surprise. He would be like the rest of the Ye family, dumbfounded. Yi Feihong looked at Yi Xing in high spirits on the martial arts practice field.
He was in a daze and his heart was filled with a bitter taste.
When Yi Xing said that he was already in the 3rd level of the martial path, he felt that he couldn't see through this son of his. Now, it seemed that he didn't know anything about Yi Xing. He couldn't believe that Yi Xing, who he had completely abandoned, had unknowingly grown to such a level. Great Elder Yi Tianchong frowned. Yi Xing being in the 3rd level of the martial path already shocked him. Now, Yi Xing's strength was beyond his expectations. He couldn't believe it. At the edge of the martial arts practice field, Yi Qing looked at Yi Xing with a cold glint in his eyes. Even though Yi Hu said that he was beaten by Yi Xing to the point that he couldn't fight back, it was just hearsay. He didn't see it with his own eyes. As a real martial artist, Yi Qing didn't put Yi Xing in his eyes. However, at this moment, he took Yi Xing seriously. The thought in his heart was not only to beat Yi Xing, but also to fight. As a true martial artist, Yi Qing actually burned with fighting spirit towards a martial disciple. This was something that he had never imagined before. But now, he really did burn with fighting spirit towards Yi Xing. Yi Xing left the stage and Yi Yuan was carried off. The people of the Ye family were still in shock. As for the 3rd battle between Yi Feng and Yi Lan, everyone was confused. Yi Lan was in the middle 3rd level of the martial path,
while Yi Feng was in the peak third level of the martial path. The two exchanged more than 10 moves and Yi Feng steadily gained the upper hand. In less than 30 moves, he defeated Yi Lan and entered the top 4. The last battle was between Yi Xian and Lu Shuangling. Many of the younger generation of the Ye family raised their spirits and showed interest. In Greenleaf Village, Lu Shuangling was definitely one of the top girls in terms of appearance. Her cultivation was also very high, reaching the peak third level of the martial path. This made her extremely popular. Even the young Lord Yi Yunlong, who was sitting in the first seat of the pavilion, became more spirited when he saw Lu Shuangling enter the stage. In Azure Sky City, there were naturally girls who surpassed Lu Shuangling in terms of appearance and cultivation. However, there weren't many of them. Therefore, even in the entire Azure Sky City, Lu Shuangling was one of the top beauties. Raging Steel Fist. Piercing Flower Hand. Yi Xian's cultivation was in the late third level of the martial path. He walked the path of toughness and fierceness. His fists were wide open and full of power. He was able to rise up from the side branches and compete with the elite disciples of the main branch. Obviously, his strength wasn't weak. Lu Shuangling's cultivation was slightly higher than Yi Xian's, but she didn't dare to underestimate him. She walked the path of agility. Her hands were as fast as butterflies piercing through flowers. Yi Xian's fierce punches were all dissipated by her as if they were light brushing by her. Both of them were using low-grade martial arts. One was tough and the other was soft. It was an evenly matched contest. After exchanging more than 100 moves, the evenly matched situation between the two was broken. Yi Xian's fists were fierce and full of power. However, they couldn't last long. After 100 moves, Yi Xian's stamina had clearly decreased and he was panting. On the other hand, Lu Shuangling's moves were soft and gentle. After 100 moves, her moves were continuous and the more she fought, the stronger she became. After 130 moves, Yi Xian's attack slowed down by half a beat. Lu Shuangling continuously hit his vital points. He immediately lost his momentum and was defeated by Lu Shuangling. The top 4 of the clan meeting were decided. They were Yi Qing, Yi Xing, Yi Feng and Lu Shuangling. In the 4th round, there were only 2 battles. Soon the results of the lots were drawn. Yi Qing against Yi Feng and Yi Xing against Lu Shuangling. Today, I'll resume 2 updates. Brothers, please vote for me. Thanks. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.